Are we ready to go? Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me back there? I guess that's a yes, because it got quiet, right? All right. Well, good morning. Appreciate you all being here. We've got a very packed agenda this morning, and there's a number of folks who want to talk with us this morning. I think I have right now 19 people who signed up under the public forum. You heard it, oop. So I'm going to ask you to be as brief as you can in your comments. We usually, in the public forum, this is where we have an opportunity for people to talk to us about things that are on the agenda or other issues of concern with the agency. It's also an opportunity for our staff to maybe get back with you and get you some information to respond to your questions. So we usually allow 3 minutes. I'm going to ask you if you can try to condense your testimony down to 2 minutes because of all the people who are signed up, and I think there may be more coming, is what I'm understanding here too, that are signing up as we speak right now. So I'm going to ask you to come up again 2 at a time, and I also have found out that our timer, which usually sits on the table there, it shows you when you're running out of time, is not working. So we're going to have our staff raise her hand, and I'll remind you also at 30 seconds, and she'll also indicate when the time is up. Then I'll ask you to, that'll be your cue to essentially wrap up as quickly as you can. And I apologize for the time, but there is a lot of things on our agenda, and obviously if you have written materials, our staff will take those and make sure that we get copies of all the materials that are presented, because we do want to have your input on all of the issues we have before us today. So with that, I'm going to start at the top and call you up 2 at a time and ask you to again be as brief as possible. So for the first 2, somebody I know well, Ken Helm, and the next one I think is going to come up later, and Chris Fick from Multnomah County. Representative Helm, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Mr. Chair. For your record, Ken Helm, I'm state representative for House District 34. That's a district that's the north part of Beaverton, and parts of Rock Creek, West Haven, and West Slope. Thank you for listening to my testimony today. The reason that I'm here is to reinforce what I see is a coming decision to fund new electric buses. And I know you have a lot of competing demands for funds, and they're all worthy, and you've been considering them carefully for a while. My input is this. When we passed the legislation that made funding available through House Bill 2017, that we passed in 2017, it was important to legislators like me, and I voted for the transportation package in part because we are going to fund some transitions to electric vehicles, especially in our transportation fleets. And that's what you're about to do. I liken the point that you're at right now to the point we were at as a state back in the late 70s when we decided to look forward many decades ahead and pass a comprehensive land use planning system. Now we're sitting in a city that has benefited by that plan greatly, that integrates transportation and land use in one of the most forward-looking ways of any city in the country. Folks that passed that legislation those many years ago had to try to be farsighted and think about the trade-offs between short-term needs, which are ever-present. And we all try to do our best with those short-term needs of people needing to get to home and get to work. But the trade-off now is to look out into the future. We, as an economy in the state, are looking toward decarbonizing significantly, not just the work we're doing at the state legislature right now, but even in some of our utilities like Portland General Electric that is launching a plan to decarbonize its business sector. So please give heavy weight at this time to going ahead and taking those first steps, those first baby steps really toward electrifying your transportation fleet. It's why we voted this legislation into law in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Appreciate your service too. Chris.
Good morning. I'm Chris Fick. I'm Chief of Staff to Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson of Multnomah County. She regrets that she's unable to be here in person this morning to similarly voice her support for the electric bus or the non-diesel bus strategy before you, but she asked that I share some remarks. President Warner and other members of the board, as you know, transit plays an enormous role in the health and well-being of our community, connecting people to services, educational and employment opportunities, friends and family, ideally in a safe, efficient, and reliable manner. It knits together our region, connecting us with those on the other side of the river or the other side of the hill. It connects those in our suburbs with those in our urban areas. Transit is a reflection of our values, which is why I'm so pleased with the non-diesel bus strategy before you today. Our region suffers from some of the worst diesel pollution in the country. Diesel exhaust is 100 times more toxic than gasoline exhaust, with particles so fine they slip through the lungs and into the bloodstream and brain. Average levels of diesel pollution in Multnomah County are at least 5 to 10 times more than the state's established health benchmark. And county studies have shown that low-income communities and communities of color are most impacted by such air pollution. TriMet, as the largest purchaser of diesel fuel in Oregon, contributes to this problem. But with the plan before you today, TriMet has an opportunity to reduce its diesel and climate change emissions and lead the way toward a healthier community. TriMet will be in good company with the plan before you. Transit agencies throughout the country are setting ambitious goals to move away from diesel buses. Our neighbors to the north in King County will add 120 new electric buses over the next 3 years and transition to a zero-emission fleet by 2034. New York City announced it will convert its system to an all-electric fleet by 2040 or sooner, and San Francisco is committed to an all-electric bus fleet by 2035. Our region has a long history of environmental leadership and innovative policies. The removal of Harbor Drive, the implementation of the urban growth boundary, which was mentioned before, to protect farm and forest land, and curbside recycling were all pioneering policies. TriMet has played a key role and been a leader in this field as well, from catalyzing the rebirth of urban rail to pioneering the use of more accessible, low-floor, light rail cars. TriMet has an opportunity to continue this legacy of innovation and reflect our region's values by moving forward with a plan to phase out its use of diesel buses. And I encourage this board to move forward with that plan today. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank TriMet staff for their hard work, openness, and collaboration in putting this plan together. Signed, Commissioner Vega Peterson. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you both. All right, the next two are Connor Righton and Bill Owen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Connor Righton, and I'm here to represent the Northwest Alliance for Clean Transportation. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board today, and I really want to commend TriMet for propagating this important discussion around ways to help clean the air and environment here in Portland. This is important as our population is projected to dramatically increase and as we endeavor to maintain our quality of life in the Pacific Northwest. As we undergo these analyses, we simply ask that TriMet look at the real-world results shown by alternative fuel peers throughout the region. We remain concerned that the results of recent TriMet studies paint a very rosy picture of technologies that have struggled, to say the least, in real-world environments. We recently completed a study of the capital and operating expenses of these West Coast transit agencies, and the results showed that the per-mile cost of operating a diesel bus at 40 feet is approximately $1.73 a mile over the 500,000 mile life of a bus. The CNG figure, compressed natural gas, when operating renewable natural gas like at the Portland wastewater treatment plant, represents a savings of 19 cents per mile at $1.54, while electric comes in at roughly $2 a mile. This same 40-foot bus scenario shows that the wastewater treatment plant RNG bus would reduce carbon emissions by nearly 1,500 tons versus 1,750 tons for electric buses. This means that we can save 85% of the carbon of battery electric buses while saving significant money over our current technologies. This would allow us to virtually eliminate air quality pollutants at the same time. This allows us an opportunity to reinvest some of these expenses into other programs like the Youth Pass. And more analysis needs to be done, and we look forward to sharing our data with TriMet and working together to clean the air.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bill Owen. I've been before the board twice before, and I thank you for allowing me to be here today. I've spoken with Neil and Kelly before about preserving a bus shelter at 185th and Heritage Parkway, my home stop, and fortunately we were able to work that out. I continue to enjoy the benefits of that shelter, including my neighbors who use the stop, so I thank you. My remarks today are about another stop on the 52 line at Evergreen and 185th. There was a stop removed prior in front of the Sherry's and Safeway at Tanasbourne Village there. If some of you remember increasing ridership at Evergreen and 185th. And since then, I've noticed honored citizens, riders such as myself and others, needing seats and standing around with groceries, as there's only 2 seats in that shelter. So with increased ridership and so on, a couple of more benches or maybe a double shelter and an additional metal bench might be fortunate at that stop. Such a setup is at Cornell on 185th, and that's a beautiful setup. There's a lot of community there, and those 2 stops are pretty close to one another. That's a densely populated area, shopping, employment. So there's a lot of folks using that stop. Just wanted to mention that. I'm a regular 52 rider and very much appreciative of that line. I see other improvements on the west side, including 24-hour service on the 57 and the 20 line. Thank you. Love to see increased service on the 48 and the 62. That's for another day. Also want to thank Representative Helm and others for speaking out in favor of electric buses. I'm very much in favor of that as well. Glad to hear that today. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you both. Next up is John Charles and David Vantoff. And I know John wanted to maybe see if he could talk later, but I appreciate his flexibility in coming up here. And I will point out, at least I received all the information you sent us yesterday via email and had an opportunity to review it, so thanks for sending it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Charles, Cascade Policy Institute. Because you do have my information from yesterday, I'll just make a few quick points. First, the staff recommendation on the non-diesel plan has no finance plan. They want to spend 4 years taking you into a box canyon, buying 80 plus really expensive EVs, and then what? Oh, well, we have this $500 million premium, and we don't know how to pay for it. So we'll throw a Hail Mary pass in the fourth quarter and hope that the legislature bails us out. Why are we even talking about this? That's not a plan. This is way premature. Second, there's no environmental crisis. I worked really hard on all these air quality issues when I was running the Environmental Council back in the 80s. I'm familiar with all of them. It's a huge success story, whether reduction of CO2, which is a rather esoteric pollutant, or the conventional ones, NOx, SOx, lead, PM10, et cetera. I sent you all the DEQ data on that. That is a huge success story. Instead of crying in our beer here, we should sit back and relax. There is no crisis here. If there was, EVs would not be the solution. The electricity grid in Oregon is more than 90% of it is powered by fuels that are non-compliant with Oregon's RPS statute. So you're drawing power from essentially a dirty grid. That's not a solution. As I said yesterday, the Los Angeles MTA 2 years ago decided to go to renewable natural gas, low NOx buses, and they concluded that that would have a 39% lower emissions at half the cost. Half the cost. What do you know that they don't know? I think you need to really, really take that analysis apart and make sure you know something more that they don't know. TriMet's in the transit business. You need reliable vehicles. Reliability on EVs is not proven. Mr. Kelsey made a great argument against the plan itself himself 2 weeks ago, telling you about the horror stories at the conference he went to. Oh, they promised us 200 miles between charges. Turns out it's only 70. In my years as a rider, I've been on 4 buses and 2 streetcars that have failed. And until you get off and do something else, it's really frustrating as a rider when you're just kicked to the curb and suddenly your plan A isn't working and you don't have a plan B. You're in the reliability business. Up in Seattle, the FTA study showed that the regular diesel buses were 6 times more reliable than BEBs. Reliability, that's the name of the game here. So finally, if you feel compelled to do something, because this seems to be driven by the 2017 money, the money's there, we have to do something to take it. My suggestion is take the 10 free, essentially, they're not free, of course, they're expensive, FTA EVs that you already have or will have, use the 2017 money to take buy 10 CNG buses and 10 renewable natural gas buses with low NOx, and run your own experiment, 10, 10, 10, run them against each other for 3 years, generate your own database. Let the 70 or so other districts in the country that are rushing to get their green halo for EVs, let them be the lab rats. Let them make the mistakes. You can learn from them and you can learn from yourself. There is no crisis here. So I think this is just premature. Doing nothing is an option today, frankly. Thinking about it more, and I strongly suggest that you do nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. David, maybe you have a different perspective.
Thank you, Chair Warner. Board members, I'm Dave Vantoff, and I'm representing Climate Solutions. We've drafted written comments that include sign-ons from Oregon Environmental Council, Environment Oregon, Fourth, NRDC, and Union of Concerned Scientists. And we all are very strongly in support of the staff plan around non-diesel bus strategy. I have some disagreements with Mr. Charles on the urgency of climate change, as does the community in which TriMet operates. The vast majority of the community, including the city, the county, City of Milwaukee, have all passed resolutions because of climate change asking for TriMet to rapidly electrify its bus fleet. We've been very engaged with staff over the past year. I want to really call out their effort to analyze this very carefully, get third-party consultant work done to make sure that they're getting the right information as they put together this plan. We had some disagreements over the year. We think that the plan could be more aggressive. It could do things quicker in light of the urgency and the demands from your stakeholders for action. But we do think the plan is a reasonable, cautious approach to a first step in terms of evaluating can electric buses be part of the solution or the solution for at least the bus side of the TriMet transportation fleet. I highlight in the plan it is dipping a toe in the water. It's 60 buses over 4 years. When you're talking about over 600 buses in the fleet, that's going to be growing to over 1,000. Is a very small risk, a small investment, but it will give you enough data to analyze, are these buses performing? We disagree with the statements that were made that these buses aren't going to perform, that they're not going to be able to meet the needs of the bus routes that will be allocated towards. The analysis that was done shows that over half of your fleet will operate very well under a 40-foot slow charge bus, which is in the plan. We agree that that's the most prudent economic investment around slow charging vehicles rather than putting in fast charging structure throughout the system. So a lot of work went into the plan, and it is, again, we think a reasonable, cautious approach. We would like to see it go faster, and we will continue to talk to staff and board over the coming years as this proves out about accelerating the process. I'm not going to get into the details of climate change. I think everybody here is aware of that it is an urgent issue that needs to be addressed. Clean air, I want to highlight in the plan that we very much support the prioritization of the initial allocation of those electric buses going into lower income communities that have been the most hard hit by air pollution and air quality over the years. So that should be a core part of what you do going forward. And the economics, I'll conclude, is on the economics of the buses, several third-party, not just TriMet's third-party analysis, but other transit agency third-party analysis shows that over the life cycle of these buses, there already are the most prudent economic decision as compared to a diesel bus. You're going to save money over time, and that's only going to become a bigger and bigger savings as the cost of these electric buses go down with battery technology coming on and scale coming up as many transit agencies are investing in electric buses going forward. So thank you for considering this plan. We urge you to support it and take that first important step forward towards decarbonizing the fleet. Thank you.
Thank you both. Very, very aware of the trade-offs and issues and some of the things we're going to all learn as we move forward. So stick around. You might hear a little discussion, some of that, when we get into the staff report. All right, thank you both. Teresa Keshi Soto and Steve DeAngelo.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Steve DeAngelo. I'm a Tigard resident. I'm a commercial property owner in Tigard. I'm a self-employed business owner. I'm the president of the Tigard Downtown Alliance. And I'm a native Oregonian as well from Portland who used to ride Rose City Transit back in the day, if you're that old. I'm here today to encourage you to adopt Resolution 18-09-66 for the Southwest Corridor Light Rail Project. A 30-minute travel time from downtown Portland to Bridgeport Village is a great alternative to the frustrating and long commute we are currently experiencing. This morning was a great example. It only took me 50 minutes from Tigard to get here. I could have jumped on a train and been here in 20 minutes. Often the traffic, especially during the rush hour, spills onto the nearby surface streets as well. It has a visible negative impact on our neighborhoods and our quality of life and safety. We're really eager to have more travel options for the corridor, especially on Baumer and I-5 where congestion has increased dramatically. I know you know this. The Orange Line, which opened a few years ago, has brought many benefits to Milwaukee and specifically downtown Milwaukee. We would hope to see that same effect here in our neighboring jurisdiction in downtown Tigard. As the Tigard Downtown Alliance president, I'm optimistic regarding the economic impacts that the new line could bring. And as a business owner, I want my employees to have options of riding light rail for faster, reliable ways to get to and from work. In my line of work, which is catering and event planning, I operate with a timed delivery system, so congestion is really impactful and unfortunately ends up costing my clients, who could be you, more because of the time we sit waiting to deliver our goods. The project has a critical component of managing our growth and providing people with optional solutions. And in closing, my largest concern is our lack of transportation options for the future generations and the late planning for our most expanding area of the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Teresa.
Hello, buenos dias to all of you, and welcome to the new board members. Hooray for you. I'm Teresa Keishi Soto, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of the East Portland Action Plan, Land Use and Transportation Committee. In the past, this committee has supported the inclusion of all high school students in the Youth Pass program. We now support Opal's request to use the $5 million in unallocated funds as an addition to the funding that is currently allocated in order to extend the Youth Pass program to all high schoolers in the TriMet Service District. We are also asking TriMet to include the Youth Pass program in all future budgets. The failure to include all high school students in the Youth Pass program has been discussed and documented. This program that can train our youth to get around on transit and possibly avoid more cars on our overly congested roads has been kicked around and not given the serious consideration that it deserves for too long. As TriMet restores service that was previously cut, thank you, adds new lines and increases frequency of service, it must address the transportation needs of our youth and the contribution that they can make in the future to a more livable Portland. When I came to Portland, it was natural for me to take the bus because I rode the bus as a child and as a teenager in El Paso, Texas. TriMet is vital to our community because of the service that it currently provides, and it must continue to be a leader in fostering the bus as an excellent alternative to cars. This can't be done without including our youth. Our youth are our future, and if they ride the bus, they will be invested in creating consistently better service. Thank you very much. Like always, I will ask the board to please ride the bus for all of your needs for at least a month. All of your needs. This will give you an idea of the quality of the service in the area where you live and where you socialize and where you go to church and so forth. And then TriMet can continue to improve to be the best that it can be. And yes, we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you both. The next two, I may murder some names here. Bill Gary Falou and Rofus Villalure. I'll look forward to telling me how you really pronounce your name here. Who am I missing here? Your office?
Yes, my name is Rainfeast Genetino Vietto, and I'm with Blue Green Alliance. We are a national organization of labor and environmental organizations. We have a local chapter as well as chapters in California, Washington, and the Midwest states and in DC. I'm here to testify, something that's not on the agenda, but sort of beginning to plant the seeds to consider standards for future procurement of manufactured goods such as light rail and buses. I believe TriMet has been a leader in the region when it comes to workforce equity and contracting equity within construction. I think TriMet has definitely moved the ball for our region with that respect. But one thing I'd love to sort of encourage TriMet as we sort of are in this transition of future fleet transition as well as transition of future light rail purchases to consider what the equity lens for the workforce in those manufactured goods. Other regions have begun experimenting how to place those standards. One good example is a policy that LA Metro has adopted, Chicago Transit Authority, Amtrak, which is called the U.S. Employment Plan. What the U.S. Employment Plan is an added component to their regular RFP process that begins to ask the questions around local hire, workforce equity plan, what their investment and training will look like. And it's really moved the ball in terms of having a high roads approach on the workforce. So I'd love to encourage the board as well as TriMet staff in this transition to consider this policy tool. This tool, again, has been effective in LA Metro in bringing in a light rail manufacturer, an electric vehicle bus manufacturer to set up shop. But I will close that testimony, and I'll be sure to follow up with an email. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments and suggestions. I appreciate that. Was Bill Gary-Fallu not here? I guess not. Okay. So I'm going to move on then to John Gibbon and Chris Hager Baumer.
Good morning, board members. I'm John Gibbon. I'm the first vice president of Sweeney Southwest Neighborhoods, Inc., and I'm here to talk in favor today of your adopting 180966 and 180967, which moves the Southwest Corridor Light Rail project on. In particular, I'm here to ask TriMet, as they take over this project, to approach this with an open mind, because in Southwest there's one alignment issue that is really outstanding and we really need to deal with a large stakeholder commitment, and TriMet is going to be the ball game in a few months, and that's the Southwest Crossroads where Baumer, Capitol, and I-5 come together. The ideal solution would be to have the train stay on Baumer all the way to Tiger, but what we've discovered is that the interchange at I-5, the bridge is too low, and rebuilding it high enough to satisfy FHA is, I call it expensive, expansive, and explosive, because it would basically change that entire intersection that probably needs a lot of change, but alternatives have been suggested that we need to follow for reasons of cost. One of those is refinement. One of them is refinement 2, one of them is alternative 2, which goes across the freeway in 2 different directions. That still has to be decided. The steering committee punted to you. It's going to be punted on, and we really need to get stakeholder group, including people from Washington County, involved in hard work to make that decision and make it right, because with all due respect to your staff, they've recommended refinement 2, and refinement 2 unfortunately causes massive problems in our neighborhoods. So we want to work with you to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stopped right on time, too. And I just want you to know the staff, our outreach staff on the projects behind you nodding their head.
Good.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Chris, nice to see you.
Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to testify. My name is Chris Hager Baumer. I am Deputy Director at the Oregon Environmental Council. I provided written testimony and will touch briefly on 6 points. First, climate change is an existential crisis. When we consider who's alive today and fairness towards generations yet to be born, there really is no greater issue. But despite its best intentions, Oregon is not on track, particularly with respect to transportation-related greenhouse gas emissions. Right now, the trajectory is that we'll only get to 20% below 1990 levels instead of the 80% that we need to get to. So electrification of the transportation system is essential. Second, Mr. Charles is correct that there are a number of criteria pollutants that we have reduced over the years, frankly due to a regulatory environment that I'm not sure Mr. Charles would support today. But there are many. Diesel exhaust remains a serious issue in our community. The air toxics in diesel pollution are not addressed by the regulations that the federal government put in place years ago. So we need, again, electric buses get us to 0 emissions at the tailpipe. Third, the plan examined social costs, and it examined only NOx, which is a criteria air pollutant, and carbon dioxide, which is a climate pollutant. It didn't actually examine all of these other air toxics and the health benefits that you would get from reducing those. So in fact, the benefits of this plan are even greater than are shown within that analysis. And the electricity grid is mandated to get cleaner and cleaner, which will result in even greater climate benefits over time. Fourth, as you know, transit agencies around the country and world are choosing electric. Here in Oregon, SMART is not only choosing electric, but they're going to go to a grid where they hope to do solar energy. Fifth, e-buses are actually cheaper than diesel buses on a life cycle basis, which frees up dollars for far more important needs. And that delta will only get better as more agencies choose those buses and create more economies of scale. And finally, I do sit on the TriMet HB 2017 Advisory Committee, and it is clear that House Bill 2017 said that those new transit dollars should support transit service for low-income Oregonians. As Mr. Helm said earlier, it also identifies purchase of electric or natural gas buses as a priority area for investment. As a member of that committee, I support the current proposal to put 90% of that into better service for folks, into the low-income fares, and then allocate just 10% of that to the electric bus transition. So we encourage you to adopt this resolution. It's fiscally responsible, it will improve people's health and well-being, and it will combat climate change.
Thank you both. Thank you very much. Next, excuse me, the next two are Ron Swearin and Jeff Bissonnette. Ron?
Morning, TriMet Board. This last week I testified to the OTC about some of the hysteria surrounding some of our environmental challenges. One was earthquake potential. The studies now show that southern Oregon coast has greater risk. Another hysteria is greenhouse gases. I do believe we have those, but I believe that market forces will gradually correct those, and also some government action with higher fuel standards. Question, I guess, is how quickly do you jump into solving those? Do you take some time and find economic solutions, or declare that it's an immediate crisis? And I would vote for the first. One thing, I've written some articles for a Portland Transport blog on double-decker buses. I wrote one on the Everett, Washington system and some Canadian. I would note that British Columbia has apparently 3 agencies that use double-deckers. These are cost-effective. They're popular with people. Could be used as a substitute for light rail, And one of the advantages is that there's not a lot of fanfare surrounding the discussion and implementation of these. In Everett, Washington, yes, they did have public discussion, but they just got it done. Not months and years of discussions and outreaches. People came together and the leaders got it done. They're up to a 70 bus fleet now. So that would be a very workable solution. And if we wanted to go to light rail later, there wouldn't be a problem because the double-decker bus investment is very small. Everett, Washington is spending about $900,000 per vehicle. So they started with 23 buses. They got 90% of that paid by grants. They're now up to 70 vehicles, so that's a very cost-effective way. The only other thing, I'm sorry, I wasn't looking where. The only other thing I would say, I've also learned that there's a Montreal company, subsidiary of Hydro-Quebec, that develops electrical conversion systems for medium and heavy-duty vehicles, and that would be a very economic alternative if the bus is lightweight enough to tolerate those. So that's something to look into. Thank you.
Ron, thank you very much. I will point out our general manager has had some experience and has talked to me about that. So, so stay tuned on that one, all right?
Figured it out.
Jeff, and I'll let you pronounce your last name.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the record, my name is Jeff Bissonnette, and I am the Pacific Northwest Advocate for the Union of Concerned Scientists. On behalf of our 13,000 members in the metro region, of which over 500 are part of our network of scientific and technical experts, I want to express support for the electrification efforts that TriMet board and staff are currently working on, particularly the non-diesel bus strategy that's currently before you. This approach makes sense from a lot of perspectives. From a life cycle perspective, electric buses are on today's grid cleaner than any other technology. There were some comments made earlier that brought that into question. I'm not sure what that's based on. UCS recently did a study that showed that an electric bus operating in the Northwest has more than 70% lower life cycle global warming emissions compared to a bus fueled with diesel or natural gas. And I've submitted via email a map that comes from that study, and I'd be happy to provide more information. From a cost perspective, you've heard that costs of operating buses, electric buses, are cheaper. We know that the board has a priority of addressing communities that depend on transit service or have been marginalized previously. Electric buses play a part in cleaner air, better health, and lower operating costs that I mentioned previously that can be used to support lower fares, youth fares, or any number of investments that makes the TriMet system more accessible. From the perspective of TriMet employees, electric buses are cleaner to operate and quieter. For your drivers, a bus is their work environment. Electric buses provide an improved work environment for the people who provide the backbone of the service that you provide. As a regular TriMet bus rider myself and a devoted fan of the number 16, I look forward to the day when I and my fellow passengers are welcome aboard an electric TriMet bus. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. Again, I did submit more extended comments that will be before you, and I'd be happy to answer questions now or in the future.
Thank you, Jeff. I think we appreciate your input. I think you're pretty clear, so thanks. Yes,
Thanks.
helpful. All right. Moving on to Charles Bridgecrane and Jim Howell. Mr. Bridgecrane, you're first.
Buenos dias, señores y señores. We have some questions to face today. What's your name? Is your name John Whitmire? Hopefully you're all familiar with the name of John Whitmire. We have some other questions to face today. Is Rod Underhill an idiotic scumbag? Why do we have to face that question? Because y'all's employees created a beautiful but extremely expensive, complicated incident back in March with your craptastic fare enforcement policies. I'm in a little bit of better mood when I first started to talk about this because I see that Judge Whitmire and District Attorney Rod Underhill have created a beautiful opportunity for Sarah Westbrook to deploy her parachute. I have struggled for about 5 years. It's really none of your business whether I use sex work or selling my food stamps or shoplifting to come up with $28 to put on an honored citizen fare card. But that happens to me and other people. And then we have the incident where Ana Del Rocio is harassed and thankfully eventually vindicated by Judge Whitmire. But we've had this I mean, the climate matters. I was given a scholarship to go to New York City in 2014 and be part of 420,000 people marching in the street for the climate march. So yay-hoo for electric buses. But Rod Underhill, with his idiotic decision to prosecute Ms. Del Rocio for giving a false name, has now thrown your whole craptastic fair enforcement policy up in the air. Now you're going to have to decide, as a board, I think you should have to vote on it, whether you're going to appeal to the Oregon Court of Appeals about whether your fair enforcement system is constitutional or not. And that's just gross. It never should have happened. Unfortunately, Ms. Westbrook is leaving, so we only have Harry Supporter with us to try and craft a humane, legal, constitutional way to keep the fair revenue coming in. But it's unfortunate that a woman went to jail, that TriMet passengers almost every day get booked into jail. There needs to be a better way. It's a huge mess that all this money gets shuffled around. We pay a district attorney who doesn't use his own staff. He goes out and gets Katie Suver from another judicial district, and she doesn't win. And all you people are getting paid, not necessarily you, but attorneys, district attorneys, assistant district attorneys, staff at the ACLU are getting paid in excess of $80,000 a year. And every month I'm deciding sex work, shoplifting, selling my food stamps illegally to find $28 to get on TriMet.
So Charles, you've made your point, and you're beyond your time limit. Can I ask you?
Thank you for the indulgence, and there are no further responses required. It just needed to be on the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Jim.
I'm President Warner, board members. My name is Jim Howell. I'm an old retired transit planner. I circulated, I put in a letter to the editor in the Tribune last week. I don't know if you read it, but if you haven't, I've circulated it. I'm opposed to closing down the bus stops in downtown. There was some talk about that for several reasons. And the main reason is that they provide the connectivity in the system that's needed. Connectivity in a transit system is probably, along with frequency and span of service, the three most important aspects of a good system. And if you start degrading the connectivity, the system doesn't function well. The mall stops, they constitute the 7th busiest max station in the system, and should never be shut down because they provide the connection to the Fifth Avenue Transit Mall with its buses and trains. Even though it's just 2 blocks from the another stop, it's important that it remain. The Skidmore stop, it provides the only connection to the number 20 bus, which has just recently been upgraded to 15-minute service and all-night service. So that should not be eliminated. It also serves the Saturday market. The other stop, the King Street stop, Kings Hill stop, it probably should never have been built in the first place, but I don't know if it's worth the money to close it down, because someday it might be the terminus of a streetcar line that will finally replace this line when light rail goes into a tunnel where it belongs. Thank you.
Jim, thank you for your thoughtful comments. Appreciate it, as usual. So the next two that we have are Orlando Lopez and David Kiff Davis.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. So I wanted to start out with an older article. This is from 2010 about the Trailblazers Harvest Dinner offers much more than a Thanksgiving meal to the homeless. And it says, now in its 15th year, which I'm pretty sure they canceled a year or two ago, the Harvest Dinner offers a hot Thanksgiving meal to thousands of homeless and very low-income people in our community. Beyond the traditional favorites like turkey, stuffing cranberries, and pumpkin pie, the Harvest Dinner offers a lot more. And goes on to talk about flu shots, this, that, the other thing. But it actually offered a lot more than that with unconstitutional fare inspector checkpoints that were set up to specifically target low-income people and the homeless. Every year that you guys did that Harvest Dinner, there was a ton of police set up there and checking fares of homeless people and checking them for warrants, sending them to jail. So not only did the Harvest Dinner provide a meal, it provided a jail cell, possibly all kinds of other stuff, TriMet violations, you know. But these random stops and where you just presume guilt on people, you have these security checkpoints which amount to unconstitutional kidnapping, right? You're setting up Gestapo fare enforcement operations, corralling citizens like cattle. You know, TriMet says that you guys are going to continue to perform these random stops while you evaluate the judge's ruling. Well, you want to know what? I think a judge knows more about the law than you guys. So maybe you're not as qualified, and maybe you need to follow the judge's ruling. And if you want to contest it, and then you can find out that it's unconstitutional when it goes to another court. But this is just, and also I want to also mention that I've seen some of these fare inspectors, like one that I actually complained about, who was like a big 300-plus guy, and he stopped this lady who probably didn't pay her fare, and she was trying to get past him. He bumped into her, physically assaulted her, and then she tried to get away from him, and he called her a cunt. Okay? And I complained about that, and I said that if I ever see that guy again, that I will definitely make a big issue about it, and that you guys need to fire him. And I didn't see that fare inspector after that. So hopefully he did get fired, or he's cleaning buses or whatever. But you know, that's the type of stuff that citizens deal with. My girlfriend was homeless, and she was punched in the face by a fare inspector. Her name was Amber Anderson, and that's in your computer system somewhere. And I would like a copy of that complaint sometime if I could get it. My name's David Keefe Davis from Multnomah County Cop Watch, and you guys are one of the biggest police state agencies in the region.
Thank you.
You have 14 different agencies, police agencies under the belt, and that spans 3 different counties, Washington County, Multnomah County, and Clackamas County. And a lot of your cops are totally out of hand, and I've had my rights violated for filming.
Thank you.
And then one in, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, will you bet your pensions and your paycheck against the judge's ruling? So when the class action lawsuit comes down on you guys, that the higher ups, that you guys, you think that's a good decision to go against the judge. Well, how about this? Bet your pensions, bet your paycheck, and then add that to the class action lawsuit money if it's ruled against you. How is that a fair deal? Any takers want to bet? I'm willing to bet.
Thank you, Orlando.
I'm willing to bet you'll probably lose your pension if that happens. and your paycheck.
Good morning, board
Good
members.
morning.
As you all know, my name is Orlando Lopez, and I'm a community organizer with Opal Environmental Justice. And I am here today to talk about the non-diesel plan that's before you. I've actually been following this proposal or these conversations for a long time as an alternate for Hui Ong, our executive director, at the PTIP committee member meetings. And looking at the plan itself, there's a big assumption that the committee will recommend these resources to be allocated for the non-diesel plan. That is a big assumption, and based on the last meeting that happened at PTIP, there was a lot of confusion that happened, and a lot of people ended up voting against the things that they actually wanted. We're happy to see that there will be an outside facilitator facilitating the vote for this upcoming meeting on how those resources should be used. But it shouldn't be a given that what is being, that's what's before you is what's going to be voted on. There's an alternative proposal that's being pushed forward that we actually are the ones that are pushing forward, which is funding youth paths and also more services for the elderly and people with disabilities. That will have far greater equitable outcomes than any electric vehicles. Vehicle emissions in the state of Oregon is the number 2 contributor to pollution in our state. But TriMet buses are only 0.02% of all of those vehicle-related emissions. 0.02%. Getting people to ditch their own personal vehicles will have a greater impact on the reduction of emissions. And the only way to do that is to remove barriers and make our transportation system more accessible to ensure that people leave their personal vehicles and get on buses. So there's a number of other tools at our disposal that we can use to actually increase the ridership in our system. For folks that are low income and transit dependent, it doesn't matter if the bus is a diesel bus or an electric bus. That's not really going to encourage our folks to actually use the bus more frequent. What matters is if it's reliable, if it's on time, if it's a frequent bus line. Those are the things that matter to low income folks. Also, if it's affordable. I also want to touch on the subject that has been brought up a couple of times, and I'm glad.
Orlando, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up.
Right. It's around Ana del Rocio's case. And we were very happy with the decision that came forward. We've been arguing against the use of these enforcement tactics because of how they treat folks, especially folks of color. And I know there was a report that came out that says there was no bias, but that is not the experience of people in our community. And we actually have some disagreements with how that report was presented that we'd be happy to follow up with. But I would want to encourage that this board does not follow an appeal of that ruling. There will be a letter that will be forwarded to you. There's a number of state legislators that have signed on that are also encouraging the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Orlando. Appreciate it. So I have Maria Hernandez, and I thought that maybe elected Councilor Bob Stacey might be here. Did he come in? There you are, right in front. Thank you. Would you like to come? Is that okay? Would you like to come? Yeah, please. You're right in front of me. That's why I missed you.
Good morning, members of the TriMet board. My name is Maria Hernandez Segoviano. I am the advocacy coordinator at Opal Environmental Justice Oregon. Our members are the people who face first and worst effects of environmental racism, climate change, and economic exploitation. I am here today to speak to you about the current strategy that TriMet has put forward in regards to funding upgrades to the bus fleet and move away from diesel buses. Last year, I and many transit-dependent low-income members of Opal testified in Salem to win a new transit funding package, the Moving Oregon Forward. We spoke constantly and loudly about the need to enhance the operations of transit in our city and transit-dependent youth demanded that the legislature also funded student transportation access. Hence, you see a seventh criteria of utilizing 1% towards student transportation. I say that because youth demanded to the legislature to use 1%, which is the bare minimum. We also told legislators to use progressive tax mechanisms that doesn't hit low-income people the worst. Okay. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. A regressive tax, wage tax was supported in order to fund these investments. As low-income wage earners are paying the most for transit in federal and state taxes, as well as a fare box, it is vital that low-income communities and communities of color see direct material benefit from these investments. Legislators also left the door open that these resources could be squandered on capital projects. Operation dollars are rare to win and are rare to our system. Let me repeat that again. Operation dollars are very rare to come to our system. TriMet has a much easier time obtaining capital dollars to build new light rail or invest on any other capital investments. Operations of transit are a direct benefit to transit-dependent people. TriMet in its current plans has stated to use these new resources to purchase electric buses, and I do agree that the state legislature and the mandate does indicate electric buses as being one of the criteria. And we encourage folks to look at this new sources of funding for operations given the rare of it. This is contrary to what low-income people and youth of color have fought at the Salem state level, have asked at the regional metro level, and continue to fight both at the local and now in front of you.
All right. I have to ask you to wrap it up.
Yes. Lastly, Opal supports the transition of TriMet bus fleet away from diesel buses and towards vehicles which use clean and renewable fuels. The new state investments are the wrong resources for this end. You can reduce investments in transit policing given the recent court decision that many transit police stops are unconstitutional. TriMet also has taxing and bonding authority. A proposed regional transportation bond in the coming years is another option. All I'm asking you to do here is to consider how you use the money we put into TriMet, and because it matters, and please ensure that low-income people are not charged yet again or ignored in how that money is being used.
Thank you. Councilor Stacey, nice to see you.
Morning, President Warner, members of the board. I'm Bob Stacey, a Metro councilor who represents Southwest and Southeast Portland on the Metro Council, and along with my colleague Craig Dirksen, co-chaired the steering committee for the Southwest Corridor project. I'm here to offer Metro's enthusiastic support for your action as recommended by your staff to approve the Southwest Corridor preferred alignment and take over the management of this major undertaking going forward. Then Metro councilors Barbara Roberts and Carl Hostica convened this Southwest Corridor Steering Committee more than 7 years ago. That group of local electeds and citizens and TriMet board representatives did a careful job of analyzing the best possible solution for transit service, high-capacity transit service in this important corridor. Your participation was, of course, invaluable, both professional and technical. The region's growing, tens of thousands of people moving here, and many of them are settling in this vital corridor in the Southwest, from PSU and downtown south to Bridgeport Village. We know traffic is bad and getting worse. We also know that every evening, 30% of the commuters leaving downtown and traveling on the West Side Corridor and the Banfield I-84 corridor eastbound are on MAX. Imagine what Highway 26 and Highway 84 would look like without MAX providing that transportation service. Imagine what I-5 south to Bridgeport Village could look like with MAX serving that corridor. This light rail will provide better access to so many important destinations and employment centers. PCC, Southwest, OHSU, the future transit station communities along Barber Boulevard, a revitalized Barber Main Street, the emerging new downtown of Tigard in the Tigard Triangle, as well as the traditional and still thriving downtown Tigard, and of course, Bridgeport Village as the terminus and the gateway to the employment areas of Tigard and Tualatin. Our partnership, both with you and with the cities of Tigard and Portland, on an equitable development strategy that includes affordable housing opportunities and supporting business retention in the corridor, which you have a very good record of in your other projects, will make this a game changer in more ways than transportation. I appreciate the work that TriMet does to provide affordable transportation choices. I also appreciate the great leadership that General Manager Kelsey is already bringing to this project as you move into the implementation phase. And I want to salute his predecessor, Neil McFarland, who spent 7 years in the trenches on this project, which makes it Neil's 7th light rail project, starting with his contributions to the West Side extension of the Blue Line. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate your input. And I guess I missed somebody, or we missed the card in here. Nancy Newell, are you here?
Yes.
Okay. So you're last but not least.
Actually, I want to give you some of my background. Governor Roberts and Christine Irvin, during the Trojan nuclear plant decision, asked me to assist them. I was part of the whole committee that the chairman of PG asked citizens to participate in the decision to close Trojan. Well, you're in a position to do a big dramatic action. There is a nuclear plant that was not reported by 28 public utility owners, the only one left in the Northwest. It is 44 years old, Westinghouse design, and we were just lucky that in 2016, in December, it was so cold, transformers didn't work, and it nearly melted down, and 28 public utility owners, including the Bonneville Power Administrator, did not report it for 5 months, and the UCS is the one that put out the full report, which I'm a member of. This is not a joke. This plant operating, not only does it create waste that is going to travel down our highways, that's how they're going to solve the overcapacity at Hanford. We will be at risk in trains, in our cars, of no oversight under the Trump administration on the transport of these wastes. Why are we creating it? We have every ability through Bonneville, and they are required to. The Bonneville administrator is out of Enron. He refuses to buy the wonderful, cheap, clean, all the way from San Diego to our border, California Electricity. I have a personal friend who started that whole project and helped us with Trojan. So please, you're a big user of electricity. You could be one of the cleanest light rail in the country. And I ask you to do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate your comments.
You're welcome.
All right, well, with that, I'm going to close the public forum, and I do appreciate everybody being as brief as they did. I know you probably had more to say, but again, we do have a lot of written material, so thank you. With that, are we ready to move into our regular agenda? Seeing everybody looking at their agenda. So with that, I'm going to call the TriMet Board of Directors meeting for September 26, 2018 to order. And the first items on our regular agenda are board reports. And the first report is on the Committee on Accessible Transportation. Director Baumer?
Yes, good morning, everyone. In the board packet, there are reports on the July and September CAT meetings, and I am going to report to you only on the September meeting, so I'd ask you to refer to that written report for the July highlights. So CAT met just last week, September 19th, and here are a few high points of that meeting. There was a presentation by Cindy Diebert, the manager of bus operator training. She reviewed the training regimen that new operators undergo, and that includes obtaining a commercial driver's license, passenger and customer service training, and ADA training. The CAT members, again, discussed the advantages of having individuals experiencing disabilities assist with the training of bus operators. And they discussed issues such as ramp deployments and appropriate interaction. There was also a presentation regarding the Gideon overcrossing. CAT members are going to participate in and will continue to participate in the design of the overcrossing in order to ensure that it is accessible to all. Similarly, there was a presentation about the Division Transit Project. The CAT Ad Hoc Committee has already advised on design of the stations for that project, and they will continue to do so. Probably the most heated part of the meeting was when representatives from the City of Portland came to talk about the electric scooter pilot project. I think it's fair to say the consensus of the CAT members and folks from the public who participated in the meeting was to oppose electric scooters. The sense was that they block bus stops, they make the sidewalks less accessible, and for individuals who have visual impairment, it can be especially concerning, and especially with regard to folks who have guide dogs. So the CAT approved a resolution urging the city to end the pilot project due to the negative impacts on the disabled community. There was also some rather heated discussion regarding the proposal to close MAX stations downtown. The CAT committee only discussed that issue very briefly, but there was expressions of concern about reducing the number of stations, and the committee will take up that issue again next time it meets. Thank you.
Good report, thank you. Any questions for Director Baumer? Okay. Seeing none, let's move on to the Finance and Audit Committee. Director Stovall.
Thank you. Good morning, board members and everybody for coming out this morning. We covered a couple of different items at the Finance and Audit Committee this morning, all of which we'll be talking about, or most of which we'll be talking about this morning during the board meeting. First, we discussed the fourth bus base strategy, which again we'll be talking about in our board meeting this morning, but we just got some updates and highlights in regards to that. We reviewed the HB 2017 proposal. We got some of that exposure to that recommendation that's going to be coming to the board at the planning retreat recently. So we just got a quick update on the 2017 HB 2017 proposal. And lastly, we actually got a little bit of a preview of our audited financial report for 2018, and we'll also be having a short presentation on that this morning. So everything that we covered we'll be touching on, so I'm not going to go deep into it, but I will take the opportunity to, without revealing any information, I will take the opportunity to give just a host of recognition to Dee Brookshire and her team, Kara Fitzpatrick, Eric. We've got a phenomenal financial team here, and consistently we have audited reports that are shining. And again, I won't reference how we did on this one just yet because I know that's coming, but I do want to say what a phenomenal team we have with Dee Brookshire leading in the finance team, and a couple other folks I've already referenced. We greatly appreciate the work that you do and have done historically and continue to do. We get to benefit from the great focus that you have, attention to detail, all the things that really lead to great outcomes in our financial reporting. So with that, I can answer any questions in regards to the Finance and Audit Committee this morning. But again, many of these things are on our agenda today.
Cool. Questions for? Oh, all right. Well, let's move on to the final report, or no, not the final report, excuse me, the Metro Policy Advisory Committee meeting, MPAC. Director Way.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, board members and the audience. So I was unfortunately unable to attend the last month's MPAC meeting in person. I had a family emergency come up, but we had some staff from TriMet attend, and so I will read off the notes from how that meeting went because it was a significant meeting. So at the last MPAC meeting, the group decided to vote in support of the COO's recommendation to Metro Council to accept all 4 areas, and these are the 4 city proposals into the urban growth boundary with some exception, or with some conditions, excuse me. Many members applauded Metro staff for a thorough process to evaluate each city's proposal carefully, alongside the inclusion to attach specific conditions for each new area. And this is the point that I wanted to highlight. There's a lot of talk right now about housing affordability, as well as building more housing options for families and individuals so that they can live in expanded areas. So there was a discussion around a mix of housing types, affordability of units, importance of ADUs and smaller housing types, single-family attached and detached units, and generational and general multimodal connectivity, which is really where we come into play as a transit agency to layer various transit options for the proposals. So there were folks who had more vocal concerns around density and how and where housing was going to be built. But overall, there was general support to move forward with these plans. The meeting tonight is going to be canceled, and that is due to another major event that is happening this evening. So there will not be an impact meeting tonight, and I believe the next meeting is on October 10th.
Good.
If
Some
folks have
media items.
questions.
Any questions for Director Way on impact? Seeing none, I'm going to move to the last report now, which is a report on our Transit Equity Advisory Committee from Director Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair Warner. The Transit Equity Advisory Committee met recently and provided a series of presentations for the committee's feedback. The first of which was an overview provided by staff around the HB 2017 funding package and the recommendations made. We took feedback from TIAC on the plan. TIAC also received a presentation from staff on TriMet's diesel transition strategy, again discussing budget implications, reviewing the plan, and looking at the timeline, getting some feedback. The other thing was around a presentation around TriMet's vision, mission, and values. As we kind of get into our strategic planning process, we took the opportunity in that meeting to present the current mission, vision, values, look at some alternatives, and start getting some feedback from the committee around what sort of language would resonate most as we look to potentially reframing that language for the agency. And we encourage TIAC to go out into their respective committees and also bring this topic to their constituents. So we expect to have some good thoughts going into our internal discussion about mission, vision, and values.
Good. Thank you. Any questions on this report?
And in closing, there was also an update which I didn't want to miss the opportunity to mention on the low-income fare expansion program and the expansion of the Honored Citizen program, which in the rollout is performing exceptionally with over 4,000 participants now enrolled in the program. That was great news. I didn't want to miss sharing.
Fair. I'm sorry. I thought you were done, so I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, see no other questions. I'm going to move right on then to the General Manager report. Mr. General Manager.
Well, good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. So I have several topics to talk to you about. The first one, what I might do is actually just give a few comments on the recent decision, judge decision of State versus Valderrama. The first one is that the agency is continuing to evaluate the judge's opinion right now. It's fresh out from late last week. We are making some adjustments to our fare enforcement activities right now that we believe address the concerns the judge raised. Although we won't get into the specifics of the fare inspections, we will continue to deploy them in a manner that we believe is frankly very lawful. Just as a reminder for all of us that this is a proof of payment system. Fares are required on all our buses and all our trains, and as part of our agency responsibilities that serves 3 counties, and that represents over 533 square miles of responsibility that the agency takes very seriously. So There will be more to come. We are looking at this internally as well and discussing this with other individuals as well. So just thought I'd comment on that because it was one of the points that was raised today in a few points.
Glad you did. Before you leave that, I guess if there was any questions or comments by the board on this.
I do. Thank you, General Manager Doug Kelsey, for bringing that up. I had written an email to board members and to General Doug Kelsey saying, hey, have you seen this? And I'm sure you have. And I think as a board member, trying to serve the best interests of transit riders, as well as the community who depends on public transit, I would like further open discussion around the issue around fare enforcement. I think to have that discussion, to continue to bring it back forward with perhaps board input is really important as you all are also weighing out your options to whether or not to appeal this case or not. I also just got a email sent to us by a state representative as well as a dozen other state legislators to not appeal. I think this was a letter just that was sent to the Attorney General's office. So as a board member, I would like to stay informed and involved. I think the public, needs to know where TriMet continues to stand on fare enforcement, and I'm hearing that we are still in the works of that, but really wanted to, again, continue to remind ourselves that we are, I'm here in the interest of folks who are depending on public transit, who want safe, reliable public transit to get them from point A to point B, and I hear a lot of these stories, quite frankly. Since that article came out with the Valderrama case, I have had numerous folks contact me saying, this has been my experience with fare enforcement. This is what happened. They have shared their side of the story. So I just wanted to continue to bring that up. I know that we had a presentation in this summer around the report that was published, and I was also very vocal about the findings of the report that suggests that there isn't any, we don't do any, there isn't any bias in the way that we approach folks when we ask for their fares. So wanted to raise that up, and I don't know if it's a possibility to put that as another discussion item for a future board meeting. But I think the sooner that we can also respond to the public in terms of what are we doing as an agency, to address some of these very real concerns that people, and primarily low income and people of color, as well as folks on disability, are experiencing, that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Points taken. I think we are trying to balance that with potential legal matters that do, in fact, have a confidential side to it. So we're trying to balance all of those things. So thank you. The several points, topics to cover off here as well this morning. First, I'll cover off the ridership report for the month. As Director Stovall has commented on, we'll cover off and bring up Moss Adams here, talk about the fiscal year 18 audit summary. Also, we'll cover off with you the second quarter performance report, and just to give you another update on HB 17. And this is particularly important as this plan will come before you for adoption at the October 25th meeting. So the timing of the prior discussions on HB 17 plus what's getting ready to come before you just next month. And finally, we'll wrap up with a couple presentations of recognition. And one of them is actually a really exciting award that TriMet just received literally yesterday. So we'll share that with you shortly. Firstly, in terms of the ridership, for August, 8.2 million trips were taken on our buses and our trains. That leaves year-to-date ridership down about 0.5 percentage point. Again, context for this, you always like to be up or above, equal or above, but relative to what, particularly having been at APTA and seen some of the other numbers around the nation, 0.5 point is actually pretty darn good considering the shifting challenges that are out there in our customer marketplace. With more than 175,000 boardings on average now, we really saw no change in the weekday bus ridership. Slight uptick of 2% in the peak ridership, so that's a good sign for us. And weekend boardings, they dropped by about 1.7%. The dip, however, was more pronounced on our frequent service bus lines, where our weekend boardings dropped 3 full percentage points. Comparatively, weekday boardings on the frequent service lines were down just over 1%, as a comparative for you. The trips on those lines, they offer service, as a reminder, every 15 minutes or better most of the day, every single day. They still make up about 54% of all the bus rides we deliver in the region. So just understand the magnitude of that segment of the service we provide. In terms of moving to MAX, we saw about 121,000 average weekday trips. That was down 0.6%. Like the bus, the peak ridership was statistically flat, but actually was starting to move and continues to move in a positive direction. The orange line, week ridership was up 2.3% over last year, so a new line continuing to grow and it densifies around the line. It's good to see that continuation of its growth. You may recall in the June ridership report, the weekend service on the orange line suddenly jumped 13.5%. So the weekend service variable is an example, though, on ridership like that, it can spike up and down, just so those ones in particular. That's one reason it's really relatively low weekend ridership overall, particularly compared to some of the other MAX lines that we offer, so still growing. So things like events, weather, et cetera, can alter those numbers. The blue line carries 46% of all our ridership, so that's our heavy line, our big line in the network. The orange line in comparison carries about 7%, so really a small numeric change can result in a large percentage change. West was down 3.7% year over year with just under 8,000 weekly boardings, so still one for us. It's softer, not as dramatic a drop over the last month, but still an area for concern for us. Second item I'd like to cover off today is the Finance and Audit Committee had a briefing this morning on with Moss Adams, so I'd like to bring up our outside auditors if I can. From Moss Adams, Jim Lanzarota, Julie Desmoine, and Ashley Austin, just to give the full board a review and presentation of the district's annual financial audit and compliance with federal awards for the year ending June 30th of 18. So I'll turn it over to you if I can.
Yeah, actually, I'm Jim Lanzarota, partner with Moss Adams, and actually Julie and Ashley, certainly key members of our team, along with others, but I'll be the one providing the remarks today. So anyway, very pleased to be before you to complete the process of performing an audit, which is the communication to the board. So do I have the control over here? Oh, okay. That's a dangerous thing. See if I can figure out how to operate it, though. So which click? Is it the right click, left click? It doesn't seem to be working here, so. Maybe you could just do it from the laptop. I'll just, okay. So go ahead. So what I'd like to do is talk to you about the service that you engaged us to perform and the results of that. And so obviously you just heard from Doug about all the operational statistics that you use to make decisions, critical decisions for TriMet. And this financial statement is kind of the financial scorecard or the results of all of those decisions that you make. It's a critical document that your stakeholders, you as a board, and your funders use to help you in making decisions. The Federal Transit Agency relies on this financial statement document in making decisions of funding. And then when you go out to the bond markets to obtain financing for your projects, you've got investors that are very interested in this document in making critical decisions. An important one is a risk of investing and what interest rate you pay on your bonds. So the accuracy of this document is pretty important. So that's why you engage an external audit firm, in this case Moss Adams, to audit the accuracy of this document. It's also a requirement of the federal, some of the federal agencies that provide funding. The state requires it, and your own policies require an annual audit of the financial statements. So we perform that audit, and we did it under a couple standards. So that first bullet point, if you go back, requires us to do a number of things. One is to opine on the accuracy of this financial statement document. So we provide an opinion. We also are required under government audit standards to look at your internal controls. So what are those checks and balances that management uses to produce an accurate set of financial statements? And we have an obligation to report the results of our review of those internal controls. So that first bullet kind of covers that, and we'll talk about the reports that we issued there in a moment. Since you receive federal grants, there's also a requirement of your federal funders for you to receive a compliance audit. We call it a single audit, which means that you don't have all the federal agencies descending upon you to look at compliance. They all ask us as your external auditor to look for compliance against the specific requirements that they place on you when you receive that funding. So we provided that audit, and we'll share the results. Since you're an Oregon municipal corporation, Oregon says that your external auditor will test your compliance with certain state laws. And the primary areas that we cover are your budgeting, so how well you meet the public involvement in notices and how you administer your budget. And also procurement is a big area we spend time. Meeting the Oregon Revised Statutes on public purchasing and your own contract review board policies on how you handle purchasing. So I'll talk about that. And then also you have a revenue bond that requires that your auditor look for non-compliance with the provisions of that and provide a report to you on our findings there. So go ahead. So here's the reports we issued and the findings. We're very pleased to report to you that we issued what we call an unmodified opinion. So the technical term unmodified, we like to say a clean opinion. So basically we were able to, as a result of our work, determine that these financial statements are materially accurate. We're also pleased to report that on our compliance testing of your federal grants, that we had no non-compliance findings there as well. We found that you had the appropriate internal controls to help you meet those compliance requirements, and in fact, you did comply. On the Oregon minimum standards, 8 or 9 different areas of state laws that we test. Again, we found no areas of non-compliance. So a very nice result. I'd say the most common types of non-compliance we find are things like overspending on a budget item or perhaps missing a disclosure for the budget, like a disclosure of when you're having a public hearing or a budget committee meeting, and the public needs to be involved in that. But in any event, we found no areas of non-compliance on your part, so that's very good. And then on the revenue bond, 2001 revenue bond, again, we found that you were in compliance with the particular covenants and issues there that we're required to test. And then this notes that we will be issuing also or helping you with, it's called a data collection form. It's actually a document that you provide to the federal government on all of the federal grants that you've received and expended. And we're part of the process that certifies the filing of that document with the federal government, and we still have that work to do. If you would go ahead. Now, an important part of the audit is communicating with you, and so Travis was gracious and let us come into the audit committee meeting and give that a very detailed report. And I have to say, your enthusiasm is very engaging for us. It seems like you're the right guy for that committee. I imagine.
We'll tell you why in a few moments.
We find with our government clients, those that choose the best practice of having an audit committee, it's probably not the first committee that board members want to sign up for. So I appreciate Travis's enthusiasm. So we went through these required communications. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I thought as a board there maybe are a couple there that you would want to hear about, or I would want to hear about as a board member. One is, geez, did we have any issues with management? You know, were we asking questions and we weren't getting responses, or responses seemed a little odd? And we didn't encounter anything like that. So management was very responsive. I'd say the timeliness of their responses was fantastic. So they really take this audit seriously and really helped us facilitate the audit process. Also, you know, were there any other difficulties encountered, untimeliness or anything like that. Nothing happened. So we were very pleased with the process of the audit. And again, there's a written report to you that goes into more details on those particular required communications. Go ahead. Now, I mentioned that in an audit, we are required to look at your internal controls. So government audit standards require that we do a couple things. We need to know the key transaction cycles and account balances in your financials, and do you have the proper checks and balances to do your accounting accurately? And then if you have what we call material weaknesses in those controls or significant deficiencies, we need to report that to you. And again, we're very pleased to report that you have very good internal controls. They're designed well, and management is in fact following the controls that you have. Now, in any audit, there's an opportunity to identify areas that improvements could be made or provide our insights and experience of best practices. And so we have had a number of communications with management in some areas where there could be some improvements, but none of these rise to a level that are required to be provided to you in a written form. So that's excellent. So really that's the result of the audit. It's a pretty impressive to get through an audit of an organization this size and not have any findings to report to you. You know, some of the Oregon minimum standards is the most common type of area where we would have findings of a governmental agency of this size, and you have none. So really, our hats off to your leadership, Dee's leadership, as you mentioned earlier, and also your accounting staff, Kara and Eric, in the preparation, and their team. I know there are others that are very involved in the preparation of this document. I would say in Oregon, it is a minority of agencies where you're able to have the experienced staff to put this document together. In most cases, it's either the auditor or another third party that drafts this document. You have the expertise in-house to do it. And so it's always a pleasure to review this because they do such a great job on it. So I would entertain any questions that you might have.
Questions or comments? Questions?
I'll
Go
make
ahead.
I'll just make some quick comments. You know, I said earlier that I would keep my comments brief earlier because ultimately I wanted Jim to be able to share that this was a very clean audit, which I was able to ask Jim earlier, and I'll actually go ahead and ask you the same question, Jim, just for the benefit of everybody that's here in attendance and watching online. But what % of organizations of this size and government agencies actually experience an audit of this nature as far as the cleanliness of this audit?
You know, obviously we have our own client base to kind of base that on. I'd say you're probably in that 10 to 15% range are able to get results like this. I would say a majority are able to get clean opinions, but there's generally some area, a significant deficiency in controls, some area of non-compliance with a federal grant, or like I mentioned, some non-compliance with some of the state laws. There's common to have a couple findings in there with most government agencies that are of this size and complexity. So to come away with none is a pretty phenomenal result.
Excellent. I appreciate that input. So ultimately, you know, when earlier when I said I think our team needs all the accolades they can receive on a performance like this, I will absolutely reiterate it and just continue to say thank you so much for the hard work. I'm a recovering accountant, so I know a little bit about what it takes to produce something like this, and it is a Herculean effort to be able to put all this stuff together and not just do it in the preparation of budgets and things like that, which we've heard from, you know, the folks that review our budget at the beginning of the budget season. They've also consistently said that we've got great performance there, but in the consistent performance of our day-to-day jobs, which sometimes I think gets missed in the monotony of just going about everything we do. There's a dedication to continuing to make sure all the numbers get put in the right boxes, all the information gets correctly recorded, and then all the things, even things out in the field that kind of drop down to the front line are also taken care of, which takes a lot of determination to make sure that that's all captured. And I think that's kind of where we sit from a culture standpoint, and making sure that from the bottom up and the top down, we're constantly and consistently producing great results. So Jim, thank you for coming out. And as I shared with the Finance and Audit Committee this morning, most people believe that the holiday season is the most wonderful time of the year. I think it's audit season. So, for the board members, we'll be open for any questions in that regard if you have questions for us. But you can also ask questions of Jim at this point.
Or comments about the last comment. Any questions or comments for our Finance and Audit Committee Chair or our auditor? I guess
very simply, just to recognize as a new board member with a lot of different balls to chase, a lot of new programs to learn about, it's comforting to hear from your report that the house is in order financially speaking. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and obviously, again, it's your staff. I mean, obviously we put a certain intensity to the audit work, trying to find errors and issues, but it's your staff that deserves that credit. We just get to tell you the good news.
I just want to second what Travis said about the staff work and the people working on this. It is amazing, and it's nice to see that year after year we have this kind of result. So I want to stress for everybody watching this is not unusual for TriMet. And you've been here how many years with us?
Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah. And so you can attest to the quality the folks have been putting these financials together and monitoring us. So again, it's nice, it's wonderful, and it gives me great comfort that we do have this kind of staff and the quality of the work that they do. So hats off to you, and thank you for doing your work and giving us the audit. It's much appreciated.
I do have one more question for Jim. Just say, I've gotten the opportunity to sit through quite a few audits, and again, it's so much fun. Now, being a firm that does audits, you yourself get audited through your processes and things of that sort. Just for the, and which I've seen a number of times, and I've seen some of that feedback. But just for the confidence of the other folks that again are listening, what type of audit or review do audit firms go through themselves?
Yeah, good question. Anytime an audit firm does these external financial statement audits, we're required to have a peer audit, if you will. So every 3 years since the requirement's been in place, we have in fact been audited by our peers to determine. So we have a number of internal controls ourselves. We call them quality assurance or quality controls, and we're tested on how well we do as an audit firm. We have received a clean opinion every year that we have been audited by our peers. Sometimes there are findings, just like for our clients, that we address, but we have received a clean opinion every time that we have been subjected to an audit by our peers.
So that just increases the overall confidence that everything that we're discussing here and talking about here goes through multiple levels of review to ensure that we're doing things correctly and appropriately as defined by the various GASB, the organization that sets many of these rules for the way we do accounting and our recording our financial information.
And you do a number of best practices too, which you should be acknowledged for. One is having an audit committee. So some of you that are familiar with the public company sector, Sarbanes-Oxley came out with a number of requirements that aren't applicable to governments, but you have chosen to utilize one of the requirements applicable to commercial entities, which is to have an audit committee. So that's fantastic. Another thing is you put your external audit out to bid. So while we've done your audit for a while, we've been subject to a competitive bid process that gives you an opportunity to make sure you're hiring a firm that's qualified and experienced and meets your needs. And we're appreciative we've been selected, but the point is you do a number of best practices to make sure that your audit is of the best quality and can give you the assurance that you're looking for as a board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Thanks, Jim. Just as I maybe call up Maurice Henderson, our new Chief Operating Officer, I just wanted to go back to one of the first topics referring to the State versus Valderrama. And I may have undersold when I referred to there's some legal elements to this. And so I may ask someone far more capable than myself, maybe Shelley Devine, our counsel, to talk about our role versus the government's role in the case itself. So maybe Shelley can bring a little more clarity.
Thank you. I was going to ask a question.
Thank you.
So that's good.
Can you hear me? Is that working? Is it working now?
There you go.
There we go. Good morning, board members.
Good morning.
Well, as Director Kelsey said, General Manager Kelsey said, the case name is State versus Valderrama, And what you'll notice is missing from that case caption is the word TriMet. TriMet is not a party to that criminal case, so that's an important reminder when we're talking about the decision to appeal, because ultimately that will be the district attorney's decision and the Department of Justice, the Oregon Department of Justice's decision. So just wanted to clarify that. There were some comments made during public forum that made it unclear. Thanks.
So to make that clear, it's not our decision to appeal. We don't make that decision.
Correct.
All right, thank you. That's very helpful.
So TriMet is not a party to it?
Yes.
So, okay. So thank you. So again, as I just indicated, so welcome to Maurice Henderson. Been here just over 2.5 years, and as Jim talked about in the audience,
Months.
That's just how it feels. So it's all in warp time now. No, Maurice has been terrific in his transition. Again, so as he moves into this chief operating officer role, part of it is to report on how we're doing on the system performance that Jim referred to a little bit earlier. So, Maurice, if you can just take us through the key highlights of our performance for past quarter.
Sure. So like Jim, I'll try to wield this appropriately. Mr. President, Board, General Manager Kelsey, audience here and watching. Again, my name is Maurice Henderson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at TriMet. I'll be reporting out on the second quarter performance report. One of the things I can say, and it's a good caveat or dovetailing off of the last presentation, it gives me a great deal of confidence. Dee Brookshire and her team and all the folks that I've encountered since joining TriMet have been top-notch professionals, take the work extremely seriously, and the focus on customer service is really job number one, and Doug has really reinforced that with me. And as part of that, our efforts around continuous improvement are really the focus of TriMet right now. And so the first slide that I believe is in your packet speaks to the preventive maintenance. Overall, I'm happy to say that our preventive maintenance is exceeding the standard of 80% at about 94% overall against our different modes that we provide. In rail equipment maintenance, we've increased by about 16% to 99%, and maintenance of way saw a small year-over-year increase, and our fare equipment has returned to a 100% preventive maintenance standard, so being completed on time. In terms of light rail, the mean distance between failure, which I'm sure you all have heard that expression or that term before, has increased by 9.4% over the last year. A revised MDBF methodology was introduced that has essentially tightened up the way that we do that calculation. So you'll see some of those numbers changing over time, hopefully continuing to move in the positive direction. In terms of our fixed route bus MDBF, that's increased by about 19.4% over the previous year to 14,381 miles. I believe the previous year was around 12,000, about 12,000 miles. And maintenance attendance has remained steady at around 94% overall. And that's just the correlating slides. In terms of on-time performance, as I mentioned, this quarter we've seen a steady uptick. The only slight variation has been WES, and some of that was dealing with some infrastructure improvements that were happening during that period. So that accounts for the 0.02 change. Again, that's the employee attendance. In terms of bus service on-time performance, we've improved by about 3.2% overall. That's an increase, or sorry, a decrease of around 1% from last quarter. Quarter one generally has been the best bus on-time performance on an annual basis. The max service on time is increased by 2.6 percentage points over the past year to 90.1% in quarter two of 2018. As I mentioned, the WES is up. Transportation employee attendance, again, is around 90.3, a slight improvement over last year. Let's see. Sorry. let's see, boarding rides. Here we go. Boarding ride revenues hours overall has declined by 2.3% compared to this time last year in 2017. However, there's a slight increase from the past quarter. Both bus boarding per revenue hour and max boarding per revenue hour are down by about 3% compared to this time last year. However, the past quarter saw improvements of 0.0% for bus and 3.2% for max compared to the quarter one. And then on the west boarding rides per revenue hour were down 7.3% from last year. The year-over-year declines still reflect larger employee closures and job losses in the corridor. So we've seen a number of companies along that corridor west serves closing down or moving operations elsewhere. Let's see. In terms of operator support, we look at our key performance indicators there are collisions, complaints, commendations, and rail rule violations. Total bus collisions overall are up by 13.8% compared to last year and also up from the previous quarter. The increase was driven primarily by the increase in the number of mirror strikes. So you can see a slight uptick of about 47 from last quarter, so 16.8% increase. I also just want to commend the staff, particularly Nathan Banks, who was able to break out the collisions in a more aggregated way so that you can see the difference in fixed object, parked car, bike, pedestrian. So as our data collection gets richer, we'll continue to give you that information. It's a personal interest of mine, having worked at the city and being very focused on Vision Zero, which I know is also a philosophy and a methodology that TriMet is very supportive of as well. Let's see. In terms of max collisions, we remained comparable to prior years and prior quarters. There were 2 fewer, thankfully, bike and pedestrian incidents, and overall the number of collisions is very small with the max. In terms of complaints, total fixed route bus complaints per 100,000 bus rides are down 22.8% compared to the past year and down compared to the last quarter as well. This quarter saw 4.4 fewer service delivery complaints, a similar number of public relations complaints, and a 0.3 more safety-related complaints over the last year. Let's see. In terms of the max, same metric, about 100,000 rides. We were down roughly 25% compared to the prior year, and this quarter saw 1.6 fewer service delivery complaints, 0.3 more than in the public relations complaints, and 0.4 more safety-related complaints compared to this time last year. Most of the safety-related complaints were regarding other riders. The overall occurrence for the 100,000 is very low and a strong performance in this area. In terms of commendations, bus operators per 100,000 were down from the prior year, but unchanged from the prior quarter. Max commendations per million boardings were up compared to the prior year as well as from the prior quarter. In terms of max rail violations, per million miles increased by 4.8% compared to last year, but have decreased over from the prior 2 quarters. Transportation is working to continue this recent downward trend and through improved training and communications. Training and supervisor support continues to focus on less experienced rail operators in key locations on the rail networks that have been identified as having higher incidents of rule violations. And that concludes my report. So any questions that the board might have, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Yes, Dr. Simmons.
As I was reviewing this information prior to the board meeting, a question came in my mind as to whether it would be possible to have the same kind of key performance indicators under operator support for the lift. In terms of, so as a board, we could know about collisions, complaints, accommodations.
Okay.
Obviously, we might not have rule violations, but we have it for bus, Wes, Max, and it would be of interest, I think, to the board to have that kind of information.
The CAT committee does receive that data.
But it would be nice to have that as part of this benchmark.
Yeah, we can, that's something we can easily do, because I think as Director Bowman's indicated, that is available already, and we all go through that, but we'll include that in future reports for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, good comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
I have a question. Thank you for your presentation, and also welcome again
Thank you.
to your new role. On page 8, where you were talking about, sorry, not page 8, but starting on page 10 with the bus complaints per 100,000 boarding rides, can you expand a little bit on the service delivery? That's the green line, or the green, not the green line, but the green mark on the chart. And can you talk a little bit more about specifically those types of complaints around service delivery?
Sure. In terms of
What does that mean? So I see service delivery, public relations, and safety related.
right, so I believe service delivery is focused on, for example, frequency, the timing of the bus, things of that nature. And I'm not sure if there's other issues that would be.
It would include pass-ups as well, where buses are full
On-time
and we can't carry anymore.
On-time performance, is that one? Okay.
Yeah.
So that is, I mean, I just want to make a comment that is, it's, to me, I'm looking at this and those types of complaints really overshadow the type of complaints that are categorized as public relations and safety related. And is our agency working towards minimizing that?
Well, we had,
Yep.
we had actually 4.4 fewer for service delivery during the quarter.
Right, but just overall, are we just, I wanted to just get some understanding around how are we minimizing the service delivery complaints?
In terms of the complaints?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, one, we're consistently working on training with our operators. Certainly our public relations team is making sure that we're hearing from the community and providing them various opportunities and various mediums to make sure that concerns that they have are being heard and being addressed. I know that the GM in his prior role as COO was very much focused on this continuous improvement process. So I think for TriMet, we are continually looking for ways to increase the customer experience so that it's a positive one. We recognize that we will fall down at times, and you know, this report shows that there are moments where we haven't done our level best at everything, but we'll continue to endeavor to do that and make sure that we're available and accountable to our customer base.
Could that also correlate to some of the proposed stops that are getting closed? I don't know.
So firstly, this is about bus, not the stops closed, which would be max.
Okay.
So what maybe if I could just tag on a bit to Maurice's comments and to your question. So I very much agree with the training piece. So part of that service delivery one, I think when we benchmark ourselves to other agencies, we actually show up quite well. So it's a relative to what? So in terms of the industry. But there are things that we have that are in the pipeline, and you're seeing through results of on-time performance. So for many years, we never measured when the buses or the trains, in this case, the buses left the yards. Now the team is up into the mid to high 90% departures every morning on time that we get out and hit our marks for our system. Also, HB 17 is part of service delivery, pass-ups, new routes, the expansion of the service, more capacity, more frequency. So you'll start to see that continue be some of the sub-elements that feed into the service delivery experience. So that plus not just HB 17, but the employer payroll tax, the general funding of the system. So as we rewire our system for growth, you'll start to see, I think you'll see this continue. This is I think I would consider this, the gap, I'd say is, for me, is less important than the trajectory downward in terms of continuous improvement.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I am just trying to get more understanding around why, I mean, as a board member, new board member, trying to
Yep,
understand these
absolutely.
graphs and interpret it the best way that I can, so.
Yeah, I understand. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you very much, Reese, and thank you for that report. Next, I'm just going to call up Bernie Bottomley if I can, as the board. Do you want to take a?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. We had one board member that needed to take a break. Do we need to take maybe 5 or 10 minutes now, or you want to wait, keep moving ahead? Keep going?
Who left?
Would you like a break?
I'm okay.
Okay, let's just keep going.
You're going to keep going? Okay, great. Well,
See, I was trying to give you some more time.
that was a perfect time to buy some time for Bernie to come up here and get seated, so thank you. So as the board has had several updates on the status of HB 17, and we heard from some public testimony today as well on it. Again, as a reminder, you're going to be needing to take action on this, on the plan next month. So Bernie, I just want to give Bernie a lot of credit. We talked about Dee on the Finance and Audit Committee. As a general manager here, it gives me great privilege to work with some amazingly talented leaders. And Bernie deserves a lot of credit for dealing with and stewarding through the public process a very complex issue that is full of high engagement. I've received from many people Bernie's capabilities of dealing with the complexity from elected officials throughout this region. So Bernie, I'm going to turn over to you for a quick synopsis and to set the stage.
Thank you, Doug. So just very briefly want to give you an update on the House Bill 2017 process. As Doug mentioned, this will be coming to your next month's meeting, and it's important that the board take action at that point for us to meet the November 1 application deadline. If we miss that deadline, it's May of next year before we have another window to apply, and funds flowing out of House Bill 2017 then wouldn't arrive until, say, October or November of next year. So we want to meet that window. Just a little bit of overview on House Bill 2017. The TriMet board has a slightly different role than normal as it relates to House Bill 2017. You're what's called the qualified entity. And that's kind of like the mother hen for all of the money that comes to the Portland region. This board makes the decision on behalf of the region, areas both inside and outside of the TriMet district, to submit the plan, and then we are also the conduit for the funds that come from the state and go out to those entities. That was set up that way because the legislature actually wanted the maturity and the sophistication of the TriMet staff and the TriMet board having some oversight of this process. So what we'll be bringing to you next month is a 3-year plan for both TriMet's use of House Bill 2017 funds as well as the other transit providers in the region, SMART, Sandy, South Clackamas, and so forth. Their plans will be integrated with the TriMet plan, and then finally there'll be some proposed allocation of funds to the counties themselves, Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas County, and they will have programs that they themselves will operate and contract for. So all of those will be wrapped up in the plan. There's been extensive public involvement both in the development of TriMet's plan and also the plans for the subrecipients. TriMet has held 11 meetings of the advisory committee, and you heard a couple of folks today who are on that advisory committee. Been very robust and good conversations in those meetings. In order to develop the proposed budget for the plan, we held a series of open houses. Those were very successful. We had a lot of participation. We subcontracted with ERCO in order to access communities that we normally wouldn't have attending to those workshops, and they subcontracted with SCI and Centro Cultural and a number of other organizations to ensure that we had broad representation. And then the general manager had his many, many listening sessions throughout the community, and we used those as an opportunity to get feedback as well. And then here over the last 2 weeks, we've been holding a series of open houses and online forums for folks to give comment on the draft plan. In addition to that, we've made presentations to a series of bodies, including JPAC, the Region 1 Area Commission on Transportation, and each of the county transportation coordinating councils have had presentations and an opportunity to provide input on the plan. And then each of the subrecipients have had their own separate public involvement plan at their level. So the proposed budget for the plan looks like this diagram, and this is the 5-year look. As you'll recall, in the first few years of the plan, we can't actually put as much service out on the street as funding would allow because we lack operators and mechanics to service the vehicles that we would need for that service. So there's an ongoing commitment of resources that we're looking at, and there's also what we call the triangle, which are one-time only funds that are not spent on operations or the low-income fare program in the first few years as we ramp up. This is the proposal that the advisory committee asked us to take to the public for comment. And this will be the basis for the conversation on this coming Friday, where the advisory committee, we hope, will make its final recommendation. That'll be coming to you. And the key components of it are the low-income fare, which we've actually implemented already in anticipation of the funding coming, because that was a commitment we made to the legislature that we would offset the impact of the tax on low-income individuals by implementing a low-income fare program. Mm-hmm. The vast bulk of the resource is dedicated to new and expanded and improved services. Those, by virtue of the language in the legislation, have to be targeted to areas with low income and high proportions of minority populations. A portion of the funds for community shuttles. These are shuttles that provide first and last mile service both inside and outside of TriMet's service territory. 1% that is required by the legislation to go to student transportation. The proposal, the legislation doesn't say what kind of student transportation. Our proposal is to use that to fund discounted passes for students who qualify for free and reduced lunch programs within their districts. A $1 million allocation to elderly and disabled programs to supplement the work that organizations like Ride Connection already do, and TriMet already funds a portion of their work, but this is to expand the services they can provide. And then finally, a 10% allocation of the ongoing resources to an electric bus, non-diesel bus strategy. And then you can see the allocations of the one-time only funds in security, enhanced transit corridors, ADA and other amenity improvements, and the non-diesel bus strategy. Pretty substantial service increases that we'll be implementing over the next 5 years. These grow out of our service enhancement plan process, which has been going on for a number of years and has had many, many, many opportunities for public input, increased frequency, increased span, and all of this targeted. If you can see the gray area underneath the map there, those are the census blocks that are identified by our 10-factor analysis as having high concentrations of low-income and minority populations, as well as other vulnerable populations. There's a map in your packet of the locations of the community shuttles and some of the service that we will be supplementing that travels inside and outside the district. The legislation called on us to better coordinate services between districts, and so there's some allocation of funds to that. And then there are plans for each of the sub-allocation areas that I won't go into here. As I mentioned, we're shooting for the November 1 deadline for application at ODOT, and then they have a pretty extensive review process internally before approval in what we hope will be May, and then we would get our first allocation of actual funds just before the end of the fiscal year, hopefully. And so that's the time frame. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Good report. I think the question I have, so the 2017 committee's taking its final recommendations in the next few days. Is that
On
right?
Friday, we hope, yes.
Okay, so that's important. And Opal's comment about their concerns about maybe more money is going towards service or low income and not as much the buses, that issue will be resolved. And if we take some action today that does not foreclose us amending those. the action
Correct.
Today to
Yes.
reflect any changes that are there.
Correct, yes, that issue, the question of allocating that $5 million to a non-diesel bus strategy versus other investments will be on the table at that meeting. We're hoping that that committee will reach conclusion and bring that recommendation forward to you at that point. The reason that we brought the battery electric bus strategy this month and House Bill 2017 next month is we just didn't want to overload you with two, of those scale of decisions in one meeting.
Appreciate that. And then for the record, we had a little discussion about this in finance and audit, with the additional monies that are allocated to school transportation that's been, I guess, tentatively approved by the committee. That brings our total just out-of-pocket budgeted amount probably in the $2 million a year range?
Correct. So TriMet discounts the youth fare, so we take a haircut of 50% essentially off of the cash price. In addition to that discount, TriMet funds a student pass program, a portion of the student pass program for Portland Public Schools. The board policy is that if the district and its partners can identify 2/3 of the remaining cost, then TriMet will contribute 1/3. So our share of that is about $1 million a year. We've also agreed to do that for any other district that is willing or able to provide their 2/3. David Douglas and Park Rose have done that this year and last year, so that's an additional $1 million a year. I'm sorry, $100,000 a year that we contribute. We have a number of programs that we fund for the school districts, degree completion, workforce development, and if you add those and the $500,000 of the 1% from House Bill 2017, it's about $2 million a year allocation to student transportation.
Thank you.
Chair Warner, I have a comment after your comment. So I was wondering the same thing, Bernie. My understanding is that there is going to be a recommendation made 2 days from now on Friday from this other committee. And so I think just the timing right now feels a little off for me in terms of why are we, as a board voting on, the full, the electric bus plan prior to really seeing those recommendations come forward. So I think for me, it would be better if we just postpone the package around the bus fleet and the ask for funding until we see that recommendation come in 2 days from now. So this is sort of a comment as well as something that I would like to ask if we can move that item, move the vote today to next month, because I would like to get more briefed around what are going to be the budget implications if the recommendations are slightly different than what is being on the table right now.
So, of course, that decision is up to the board. The reason that we chose the timing that we did are two points. One is that the plan is contingent on the committee and the board approving, and the Oregon Transportation Commission approving the funding for the plan. So the thought is that you can adopt this plan. There are two components to the plan. One is the long-range strategy of setting out a stake and saying that the agency is taking the initial steps towards achieving a non-diesel fleet by 2040. The second is the short-term strategy of acquiring battery electric buses. The long-term strategy is dependent on future funding and the identification of other resources over time. The short-term strategy is really dependent on whether House Bill 2017 funds are available. So the plan itself, the battery electric strategy within the plan is contingent on approval of the funds. So you can approve it now, and if the funds aren't approved by the advisory committee, by this board or the OTC, it's essentially null and void. You haven't approved a plan that's going to move forward. The second is that in order for House Bill 2017 funds to be expended on a battery electric bus plan. There needs to be a plan approved that references the expenditure of those funds. So the rules under House Bill 2017 require that there be a plan adopted to receive those funds, essentially. And so the thought was to try to bring those at, close but not identical board meetings because of the scale of the decisions that you'd be making.
Got it. And I think I just want to say that I think for me it's important to, again, hear the recommendations that are coming around, around just HB 2017 funds, because the bus plan correlates to that, connects to that. So I think for me it's not a question of whether or not we need to move to cleaner energy, because I fully, wholeheartedly support that. It's just a matter of, can we wait 3 weeks as a board at our next board meeting until these recommendations come in from various other partners, youth advocates, folks with disabilities, wanted to hear their recommendations first on Friday and then have the vote next month. So it's just a matter of, can we just push this to next month?
And I think the answer, what I heard from staff, is yes. Is that right?
Technically, yes. If you want to do that, that's up to you.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I think it's up to the board. We can talk about it now, or we can talk about it when we get to that item.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to jump the gun.
So why don't we have that discussion when we get to that actual item, all right? But thanks for your comments, and thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Bernie. So the last time, I'm just going to call up, if I can, Harry Saporta and Commander Westbrook, if we could. And just as they come up, as you know, my first 6 months here as your general manager, there's been quite a number of changes amongst the organizational leadership side of TriMet. And one of those changes, in fact, is two of them in front of you here today. Firstly, Harry Saporta will be retiring next spring. And so we've I think some of you may be aware, we've just been successful in recruiting Marla Blagg from BART near San Francisco to replace Harry, so there'll be a transition going on. But also as part of transition, Harry, if you want to talk about Commander Westbrook's transition as well, and we have a small token of our appreciation for her.
Sure. So if you notice today that the commander is in a not approved uniform.
Did notice that.
This is my new uniform. She's on her way to
Or you're undercover.
Yeah. So today, the Commander Westbrook will be retiring. And so with that, I wish to express TriMet's great appreciation for her leadership over the past 2 years, trying to keep 14 different agencies going as a cohesive unit is difficult. And under the commander's leadership, she has done that extremely well. We've had a number of challenges over the past 2 years as well. One in particular that I think that we've paid a lot of attention to is that of assaults and aggressive behaviors against our operators and other employees. And it's with her leadership that we're beginning to, I think, see some movement there and hopefully get this issue addressed fully the way it needs to be. So with that,
We just also want to call up President Warner just for a quick photo, if we may, with Harry and Commander Westbrook.
Oh, darn. Yeah, right.
This is one of the safety and security meetings that I've been in attendance, and she said to me, "You're a nice person, but you never work here in a police office." Because I can see both sides of the situation, and I'm more of a mediator.
Thank you very much, Commander.
and with that, I would like to introduce Captain Mike Frome, who will be commander tomorrow morning.
Hello. Yes, as Harry has said, tomorrow I will take Commander Westbrook's place. I'm looking forward to the challenge. This will be a big step up for me in terms of being in charge of my own RU. I've spent the last several years downtown, either in the chief's office or in Central Precinct. I'm looking forward to continuing a lot of good partnerships, strengthening some that need to be tuned up a little bit, and overall improving safety on the lines. When I first met Harry, I wanted to point out I live in Portland. I've got kids that are on TriMet almost every day. So it's near to me that these be safe places and welcoming places for everybody that wants to use them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you. Next, I'm just going to ask if JC would come up. This is just has a bit of an announcement to share with us. I think a lot of times we forget all the work that we do in this agency and how we sit internationally, in North America in particular. And JC, if you just want to share the great news, both of us recently returning from APTA in Nashville, JC just this morning. So thanks, JC, over to you.
Yes, very quickly, and something to end on that's very fun and something you should be very proud of. In Nashville yesterday, just accepted this award. TriMet was one of 8 transit agencies across Canada and North America and the U.S., and we received this award for our campaign efforts, our marketing and outreach efforts around HOP. And we were given this distinct award, and it's something that we should be very proud of. It's for our creativity, for our multicultural outreach efforts, and for doing it on a short shoestring budget. So a lot of work has gone into this, and I accepted this on behalf of the agency, on behalf of the marketing and communications efforts, as well as the HOP implementation team, because there was a lot of work that went into this, a lot of coordination, and it was amazing to be recognized. So something that we should all be very, very proud of.
Thank you, JC.
Bravo.
And when he talked about a shoestring budget, I can attest, rolling out smart cards are complex, and most other transit systems spend anywhere, because we benchmarked on it, what TriMet spends is probably just less than just about $1 million or so. Most agencies of similar size and complexity are rolling out anywhere from $6 to $12 million in their budget. So a real congratulations on although in absolute dollars it sounds like a lot, and it is, but compared to others, it's just a great tribute to leveraging how we do our business here at TriMet. So thank you. That would conclude my overall report here this morning.
Thank you,
Mr. President.
Appreciate that. All right, well, let's move on to our action items this morning. And I will point out that Director Gonzalez needs to leave at 11:45. So if there's something we need to make sure we get before you leave, let me know so we have a full board on that. So the first item on our agenda is our consent agenda. And as I usually say, this is routine and can be everything on the consent agenda can be approved with a single motion, and anybody can pull it off. The thing is, the only thing we have here is our minutes from our meeting of August 8th.
Mm-hmm.
So if nobody has any changes or wants to pull it from the agenda, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion on the motion or the contents? Seeing none, then all in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Well, let's go on then to Resolution 18-09-64, which is authorized a contract with Balfour Beatty Construction LLC, doing business as Howard S. Wright for construction manager / general contractor services for elevator refurbishment and replacement program.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Just excuse me just one moment.
If I may, please, as we begin this discussion, I, as an employee of Howard S. Wright, a Balfour Beatty company, would like to declare a conflict of interest with Resolution 18-09-64. So I will not be participating in discussion, debate, or be taking any action with this resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you. This particular modification adds construction services, what we refer to as Package 2 of this project. It would fund the refurbishment or replacement of the elevators at our Gresham Park and Ride, the 3 elevators at the Sunset Transit Center Station, and the 4 elevators, significant elevators, at the Washington Park MAC Station. Across the system, TriMet maintains more than 30 elevators. Now, in most, if not all cases, the elevators provide critical access for our transit service. Some are heavily used. They're outdoor environment, very rigorous environment. And some of the are in our system are over 30 years old, so they've served their life cycle well, and they need to be reliable. Each renovation takes about 12 weeks, but to minimize the impact on our riders, only 1 elevator is being renovated at a time to minimize it on the overall network. The resolution before you asks the board to retain the service of Belford BD Construction, doing the business as Howard S. Wright for the second phase. We've really been pleased with our work so far to date. There have been no major safety incidents, and they have also achieved 14% minority-owned, women-owned emerging and small business participation through their subcontractors in the first package. So we're pleased with that performance. The contract modification requests an additional $5.48 million for the package. This will bring the total for the project so far to $8.1 million. The fund requested in front of you today is accounted for in our fiscal 18-19 capital budget program, and we will return to the board for some probably further contract modifications for future packages to come. Your approval, Mr. President, members of the board, is recommended.
Any questions or comments for the general manager? Seeing none then, is there a motion to approve Resolution 18-09-64 as presented?
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
No.
Not quite fast enough down there. All right. Any further discussion of the item? Well, hearing none, I will call for a vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 18-09-64, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have
Abstain.
one. Yes, thank you very much. And any, I said anybody against, but any abstentions? We have one. So the motion is approved 6-1. So thank you very much. You know, since you're going to be leaving here, Director Gonzalez, I think maybe we ought to go right down to Resolution 18-09-68, which is the resolution that would adopt the 2018 TriMet non-diesel bus plan. And what we heard, I think, from Director Way was maybe we want to continue this to our next meeting where we have the full input of the committee, or actually their final recommendations. So I think we ought to talk about that now. I think we've heard from you. I see Director Simmons. Would you like to comment?
Yeah. I've been interested in this particular initiative for some time, and also have looked at other agencies around the country that have, where the boards have adopted a resolution. And I'd actually proposed to the executive staff of TriMet some time ago that as a board we needed to be proactive and demonstrate to the public our concern about pollution and our desire to move towards non-pollutant type vehicles. I see this particular initiative before us today as really saying to the public, general public, that we believe we need to do this. I think the funding for how we do it can be determined down the road. But to wait at this, I don't see any need today to delay making a decision as a board or as an agency that we see this as a critical priority for our community.
I'm sorry, please.
I want to echo Director Simmons' comment around the importance of making this declarative commitment to a cleaning up of our fleet. And though the financing is documented in the form of a plan, of course, there is a lot of contingencies there for those sources to be ascertained. So I simply want to echo that the importance of making that declaration and commitment to cleaning up our fleet is vital. I see no reason in hesitating to make any delays to that commitment, and I personally see that there is still room for us to have and incorporate the feedback of the public with regards to the short-term funding package that will be discussed on Friday.
You go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I have, when this has been discussed in the past, I've been cautious about any quick move towards non-diesel buses, but I think that this proposal takes the right approach, and it is a cautious, thoughtful approach. But our discussion right now is whether to delay the vote on this resolution. I agree with Director Simmons and Director Gonzalez. This is a statement of policy that I think we can move on today.
So I'm a bit more challenged by the decision to move forward with electric buses, not from the perspective of I think as an agency we have to take action and we have to actually send the message that we're committed to ensuring that this agency no longer contributes, to the pollution that's negatively impacting, our environment, our standard of living, and our ability to continue to move forward in a positive way. I'm a bit more challenged in the sense that, I actually am of a similar belief that was shared by Orlando Lopez. And I believe it's kind of an Opal standpoint in that one of our biggest impacts that we can have on our community is to continue to get folks out of vehicles and onto more mass transit opportunities. So I will continue to say that, continue to support that effort, that's one of our biggest efforts that we can do. We even saw some of the information at our own retreat last year that continue to urge us to do things that's going to encourage that. So I would put it on the table for us as a board and as a community to continue to do things that's going to assist this agency in getting people out of single occupancy cars and into more mass transit solutions. The nuance that I'm going to share, from my own personal perspective, is that there is a lot of complex information that's been shared with us just even this morning from opposing views, from different perspectives. And as you wade into it, which I have done, I will not say that I'm an expert on any of this stuff, but I have waded into it enough to know that we could be arguing for the next 30 years and the next 40 years. At some point, we need to take decisive action to move forward, to make a commitment, to start to do things. If we don't, we will always be asking the additional question and looking for more research. So at this point, I'm no longer of the belief that we can sit on the fence and continue to have conversations and continue to have competing research that tends to send us in where we'll have paralysis by analysis. So while I'm still a little, I wouldn't say a little, I'm probably a lot concerned about where battery electric buses are currently. Mm-hmm. I truly at this point feel like they are marching towards the viability of any of the other vehicles. We've seen vehicles, single occupancy vehicles with Tesla and other organizations that have moved towards developing vehicles that are going to, I think, in the future be significantly better at dependability than what we're seeing in other technologies. So while, I still have great concerns about where the technology is today and making an investment prematurely, I got to tell you that at this point, we've got to move in a direction that's going to get us to a better, cleaner Oregon. And I feel like this is the absolute best opportunity. I do believe we have off-ramps built into the plan. I do have a concern about how do we fund it all. Usually when we're doing large-scale projects like this, we do have funding plans that are a little more definitive. We've got some good ideas, but I think there's some gaps that still exist with a $500 million premium over time till the year 2040. And so all of those things combined still bring me concern. And, I'm basically, as a board member today, committing future boards to execute on a plan that we're putting in place today. I know this is a long piece of kind of a comment, but I just want to put it out there that as a board, I'm sure each and every one of us has weighed this decision at length, as which I have, as you can tell, and the seriousness of committing our organization long term to a financial commitment and the potential technology that isn't quite possibly there yet, but will be, in my opinion. So I'm going to be supportive of moving forward with this action, and I'm supportive of moving forward with it today. I do believe we have built in the flexibility to move the numbers around enough to be able to achieve the long-term goal. If we have to pull back on some short and medium term, I believe we can fill those gaps in the long term. So I agree with the board members that have already spoken that I'm willing to move forward today and feel like as opposed to some of the other options that may exist, I believe this is the option that, as we sit here today, it's the best option that we have to start committing this agency and our community and our region to a better tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, board members. Being the last one to go, it's never easy on a weighty decision like this. But so I, just for clarity's sake, before I cast my vote, if we as a board decide to move forward with this plan, it sounds like the funding mechanisms, the continued distribution of funds for some of the populations that were put forward in House Bill 2017, that we would still have an opportunity to discuss that, correct?
That is definitely correct.
Okay.
That is definitely correct.
Okay, and I just want to make that point clear that was the only issue that I saw with us taking a vote on the plan today, was that I didn't have the full picture yet of the final recommendations that would be coming from the other committee on Friday. So I am in full support of, again, clean energy for our region and for our state. I think the environmental impacts are going to be very significant as we move forward. And like other board members, I will continue to raise the funding question of how we are going to continue to use House Bill 2017 funds equitably and wisely, so that we can protect our environment, have a safe future for our kids, as well as continue to provide the best transit as possible for folks with disabilities and other communities. So just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. And I guess as the chair, I want folks to know that I think it's been said. The board does need, I think, to stake out its position of where we are on this issue and changing and moving forward and making our fleet greener. And I think this is the right thing to do. I do have the concerns that we're giving a message that it's a done deal for the House Bill 2017, and I want to make it clear that we want to hear from the committee and get their final recommendations. And if we need to amend our plan to reflect that, we will do that. I can assure those. So I'm hoping they have a good, robust discussion. I thought my understanding is the committee was pretty strong on where they wanted this allocation to go of those funds. So I think we need to move forward and today and make a decision. And if we need to amend it, we either do it as part of the House 2017 recommendations, but we ultimately have our budget that we have to adopt, and we will have a lot of discussion about that, I'm sure, because kind of the longer term questions will become much more clear as we look at our financing over the next few years. So good discussion. Thanks for bringing it up, Director Way. We will, I think with that, I think we've talked a lot about the merits and the issues. Is there then a motion to approve Resolution 18-09-68, adopting the 2018 TriMet non-diesel bus plan?
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Is there any further discussion before we take a vote on the motion?
Well, I just want to say I appreciate all the efforts of everybody in helping us get to this decision. I think we've had conversations from all sides, a lot of great information, everything from just our lay individuals who've come and spoken to us, all the way to scientists who have come. Probably I couldn't understand much of what they had to share with me if they went into detail, but I'm certainly grateful for all the information that was shared throughout this process and this morning. So I just want to extend that to all the folks that have worked so hard on this, both our staff and team and all of the community members and stakeholders.
Yes, Director Baumer.
I guess just real briefly, I do want to thank the staff of TriMet for all the work that has gone into this really very sophisticated report and very detailed proposal. A couple of things that I really appreciate in the report is that we're going to continue to look at other non-diesel options, including hydrogen fuel cells. We're not necessarily locked into battery electric buses, so this does provide some flexibility, and as has been mentioned, off ramps if the technology just isn't there to make it feasible. I also appreciate that we are looking at protecting against electric outages, that this could be a real threat to our operation, and I think it's important for staff to continue to communicate with PGE, for example, about how to avoid those problems down the line. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Well, seeing none, then is, I'm going to call a vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 18-09-68, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. I'm glad we did that while you were here. Let's move on to the the third resolution now, Resolution 18-09-65, which is authorizing TriMet to acquire by purchase or by exercise of the power of eminent domain certain real property necessary for the construction of a fourth bus operations and maintenance facility. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As you are well aware, the buses that we have in our facilities are all at capacity today. With the successful advent of HB 17, the bus orders are now underway, being placed, so we need to move on what that future bus network facility looks like. So it's needed to accommodate the significant uplift in our expansion coming. We will have increase our fleet by more than 200 buses by 2025, and in July, the board approved a resolution declaring the necessity for TriMet to acquire this Columbia property and accepted the Title VI analysis for the site. The resolution provides for the acquisition of property by purchase of the power of eminent domain. I do want to point out to you, though, the power of eminent domain, in this case, it's what I'll refer to as a friendly power of eminent domain. The current owner of the property has been very professional all the way through, and just want to give Mr. Winkler credit for those discussions. So this is not I'll refer to as more an aggressive eminent domain. It's more of it's a friendly. We are hopeful the acquisition will be resolved through negotiations. However, the adoption of this resolution before you today allows negotiations to continue while ensuring that TriMet will be able to obtain the possession of the site in the time frame needed, the very critical time frame needed to meet the HB 17 implementation schedule. Before the buses arrive, we need to reconstruct that site of varying degrees to make it usable. And in fact, people, as you heard earlier from the Finance and Audit Committee, our teams can't get on that site quick enough to meet the timeframes. The purchase of the property is included in our FY 20 capital budget, and your approval is recommended.
Questions for the General Manager? Any comments?
It's good to know it's a friendly conversation at this time. Thank you.
Yeah. And I guess I would say, for those new on the board, did you mention the statistics on the light rail project, the Orange Line, in terms of we had, I want to say, 211 properties that we need to acquire, and I think there was one where we actually had to go through condemnation. So for the new board, this is the board. Our staff definitely tries to work to get an amicable settlement that's beneficial for both the agency and the property owners. And I
think
we'll see this in this case too.
Yeah, I might comment under the laws of eminent domain, there are some significant tax advantages for the seller of the property in this situation. So, so I think that's one of the reasons, as a business person, they're taking advantage of that situation. So I think that's part of the friendly component.
Good to know. Yep. All right. Is the board ready to offer a motion to approve Resolution 18-09-65?
So moved.
Have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing then, I'll move to the motion. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 18-09-65, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Let's move on to Resolution 18-09-66, which is recommending confirmation of the locally preferred alternative for the Southwest Corridor Light Rail Project.
Great. Thank you, Mr. President. The item before you today brings us to a very significant milestone for the Southwest Corridor Light Rail Project. It requests your approval of the resolution recommending that Metro Council adopt what we call the LPA, or the locally preferred alternative for this project. The action approves the Project Steering Committee's August selection, of which I was part of that committee, on an alignment for further study in the federal environmental review process. It also eliminates the other alignments from future study. This is all part of a normal process for large capital projects like this. It's truly an important moment for this organization and a time for the project within this very rapidly growing region. The project would extend frequent high-capacity transit into a corridor that needs it today and will be even more in the future. As an example, over the 4 counties, as a reminder for the board, the growth of this region will grow in the next 20 years to be about 3 million people. The proposed project constructs a 12-mile light rail line from downtown Portland to Tigard and Bridgeport Village in Tualatin. And it even includes many roadway, cycling, and pedestrian improvements, all of which are clearly interrelated and needed. The project has an extensive history dating back to about 2010, as some of the delegations talked about earlier today. The projections show that the Portland region is going to continue to grow, and particularly also in this area. The Southwest Corridor is going to grow by 70,000 people and about 65,000 jobs. And I-5 between Portland and Tigard will be congested up to 17 hours per day. Additional transit options as part of the palette of mobility in this region are essential. Currently, nearly 24,000 people commute between Portland and Tigard and Tualatin for work daily. By 2035, the Southwest Corridor project expects to carry 43,000 light rail riders on a daily basis. And I would suggest, a lot of times you have to peg for the cost structure by 2035. I would suggest, if it's in service by that 2028 timeframe that we're moving to, that the 43,000 will be far larger than that, because you usually build projects that last 75 to 100 years, not just 10 years from type of ribbon cutting. So you peg it for costing, but the demands, I suspect, will be far higher in the years to come. The LPA for the project includes 12 miles of light rail, 13 stations, and as many as 7 park and ride lots and more than 4,000 parking spaces. It allows for 32 light rail vehicles, including a new operations and maintenance facility. The project partners and the community members from up and down the corridor have worked very long and very hard to get to where we are today. It is another example of TriMet's role, Metro's role, the region's role. It takes all of us to pull off significant capital complex projects like this. This would be the largest capital project this agency has ever undertaken. The local sources have talked about TriMet, City of Portland, ODOT, Washington County, regional flexible funds, and funds from a planned 2020 regional bond measure would be included here. There's several reasons you're being asked to take this action on this item today. First, Metro, which is currently leading the project, requests endorsement from the TriMet board and other project partner jurisdictions before adopting the locally preferred alternative, or LPA. Washington County, as an example, just unanimously approved theirs last night. Second, it's important that TriMet and our jurisdictional partners demonstrate the cohesiveness and the unified support in the project in order for it to move the project to the development phase. It's very important for ultimately the funding that will be needed as part of the Federal Transportation Administration. Finally, it demonstrates the local consensus and support that FDA will so dearly be looking for. With all of these factors and others in mind, I've just outlined a few, the Project Steering Committee recommends that the board recommend that Metro adopt the LPA, and on a personal side as a steering committee member, and so do I.
Good report. You heard the report and the questions of the general manager or some of the staff that's here that's been working on the ground on this project for some time. Yes.
So far in this effort, as we've gone to both municipalities and counties, what's been the overall reception as I'm sure the commissions or councils have all been voting. What has been that overall reception of the preferred alternative?
Board president, members of the board, first off, this is a terrific milestone. If I might take a minute, I did want to thank Metro for their leadership in getting us here, and want to note that some of the Metro project leaders are actually here in our audience today. I'm joined with Leah Robbins, the director of the project, and you probably know her as the director of the Orange Line project as well. I had a chance to attend the board meeting out in Washington County last night. There was terrific support from the board members themselves. There was no public testimony there. I was not in the Tualatin City Council, but again, a unanimous vote of support to move the project into the next phase. We've worked diligently with community members. Through a Citizens Advisory Committee, they made a formal recommendation to the steering committee when they adopted the locally preferred alternative. So lot of support and a lot of desire, as you heard from Mr. DeAngelo here this morning, about providing some transit options for commuters, employees, et cetera. So that would be my response.
Thank you.
I might just comment, Tigard has not had their vote yet. That is yet to come. I think it's in a couple weeks, if I recall.
Yes.
And City of Portland, I think, is yet to have theirs as well.
That's correct.
I just wanted to make a comment for those watching and for folks that aren't aware of this, and that you can confirm it, that approving a locally preferred option doesn't mean that there aren't some still alignment issues that are still under debate. I know of one in particular, but I think one of the gentlemen earlier mentioned another one. And so it doesn't preclude there from being some further refinement once it is adopted by us and moves forward.
Absolutely. Again, thank you for having us here. This is a major step, but it is not the last step, and there are years of design and refinement further to come. Our next step is getting into project development and completing the FEIS, the final environmental impact statement. So there will be continuing community outreach related to all of those refinements, station design, station area design, as well as those very critical operational traffic zones that affect those, exactly where the track go in those design refinements. So it's a continuing process.
I might just add, the key, it might be best to look at it as a filter of decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So the LPA, or I'll call the bandwidth, within that bandwidth, the other items fall off the table as options in this process. And there's still lots of latitude, as you heard from one of the public testimonies today on the crossroads. We know there's a significant amount of discussion that has to continue on that, including the restaurants, other feedback that we've received around property impact. So still to come, well within the tolerance of the project.
So just as kind of a comparison, as we look at the LPA in this decision, it's kind of like what we saw with the division, transit situation. We voted on the LPA, but there's been a lot of adjustments since the original LPA came to the board. So I mean, there's still pieces to be had that as Leah just said, and before we well on our way. So I see the LPA as our opportunity to really have we're receiving the inside of the committee that has spent a ton of time deliberating, looking at all the different options. I believe bus rapid transit was even considered as part of this in the origins. So all that was considered and looked at. And as we move forward to LPA, we still have a long road to go, and gives us an opportunity to really start narrowing our focus and getting hyper-focused on really, will this all pencil out? Well, how would it look? Alignment issues, all of those things.
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you for all of your hard work. This is so exciting for the future of the Southwest area and really for the whole region. So I'm just thrilled that we're moving forward. Thank you.
Good comments. All right, then, is there I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just keep missing the timing here. I also want to thank you for all of your hard work. As a new board member, I know that this was a very large project that, our agency would be taking on, and I appreciated all of the briefings as well as the ones last week where we were just briefed on what the heck is an LPA and all of these other acronyms so that we can just sort of fully understand all of the different jurisdictions that it takes to, really come up with a comprehensive plan. So I, again, just want to thank you for your work.
Good. Thank you. And I guess I need to get on that bandwagon too, and thank you all. And just to point out, just following some of the other dialogue here, is that the next step in this is where we will get some answers. We'll be able to provide some more certainty to folks about which properties will be taken or not, how we're going to do alignments, how can we minimize the impacts with the environment and the built and built environment. So I think this is just a great, again, process. I think folks have done an amazingly thorough job, and a Metro needs to be complimented stepping up on this, because it's getting us to where we need to be, and I'm looking forward to the next phase of this work. So with that, then, is there a motion to approve resolution
So moved.
18-09-66? I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 18-09-66, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion's approved unanimously. Thank you again, everybody. All right, let's go down to one of my favorite things, Resolution 18-09-67, which is authorizing an application to be filed with the Metro for a land use final order for the Southwest Corridor Light Rail Project. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. So based on the resolution you just approved, this is one of the next steps that come with it, is referred to as a land use final order, or LUFO. Starting with the West Side Rail Project, the Oregon Legislature outlined a specific land use process to allow light rail projects to successfully compete for federal funding. In 2017, the legislature passed HB 3202, creating this process specifically for the Southwest Corridor. It contains 5 components. The first, it directs the Land Conservation Development Commission to adopt criteria for Metro to use to make decisions in a LUFO on a project improvements and location. Secondly, it requires Metro to create a steering committee to make recommendations on the route and other project improvements. Refer to that in just the past resolution. Steps 1 and 2 have now been satisfied, and the resolution before you now is to authorize step 3, or the application to Metro for a LUFO. Based on the feedback from the community and the stakeholders, the resolution also proposes to eliminate one of the options that the steering committee proposed for the alignment. To alleviate the concerns over the impact to natural resources, traffic, cycling, pedestrian safety, option 1, which would have included travel along the southwest Taylor's Ferry Road, would be eliminated from the outer southwest Portland segment of this project. Option 2 would instead have the alignment travel adjacent to I-5. Maps and additional detail are available, I believe, in your package in attachment A of this resolution. And I would ask to make a note that the LUFO can be amended based on changing project conditions. Also, and one of those actually is funding. So there are some off-ramps down the road. After TriMet files the application for the LUFO with Metro, there's 2 more criteria that must be satisfied under HB 3202. The first of those criteria is Metro must hold a public hearing and either adopt a LUFO or continue the hearing and submit proposed project improvements to TriMet for further review. The second is Metro, all affected local governments, special districts, and political subdivisions must attend land use regulations to be consistent with the LUFO. To continue to advance this critically important project, it's complex, but your approval is recommended.
Questions for General Manager? I know we have some staff, and our land use attorney who's worked on this is in the audience, who I've worked with on the west side years and years ago, and he's a little grayer than he was then. So any questions for them if you're interested in some of the technical details? I'm seeing none. So then is there the board ready to propose a resolution, a motion to approve Resolution 18-09-67?
So moved.
Have a motion?
Second.
Have a second. Any further discussion of the motion? Hearing none, then. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 18-09-67, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very, very much.
I did have a quick question. You did mention that you'd work with the attorney if we had any questions for him.
Okay.
You said he had gray hair. I would just
Did
like
I say
to-
he had gray hair? He's got more gray.
More gray hair. I would just like to know how he keeps his hair. I mean,
There
that's
you
really
go.
what I would like to know. I mean, I'd go for a little bit of gray. I'd just go for a little bit of hair,
I thought
actually.
you were going to ask, did Bruce cause the gray hair?
It has to do with jeans, I think.
Levi's?
Yeah. All right, no. All right, well, let's move on with that to the final resolution, I believe, which is Resolution 18-09-69, which is authorizing a modification to a contract with Stacey and Whitbeck, Inc. for construction manager / general contractor services for the Gideon Overcrossing project.
Thank you,
General
Mr.
Manager.
President. The Gideon overcrossing will be a new pedestrian and bicycle bridge over the Union Pacific Railroad and TriMet MAX stations connecting the Hosford, Abernathy, and Brooklyn neighborhoods in southeast Portland. The overcrossing will replace the original pedestrian bridge, which was removed for construction during the Orange Line. It was originally included in the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail project, but was deferred in 2010 when the federal funding came in lower than anticipated. With the strong support of the surrounding community and the city of Portland, TriMet was eventually able to secure the approval from the FTA to construct the overcrossing using the remaining PMLR funds. Once complete, the city of Portland will be the owner, not TriMet, and they will also be responsible for the maintenance of the crossing. As previously approved resolution, awarded the contract for pre-construction services to Stacey and Whitbeck. Those services are now in process, and TriMet is prepared to modify the contract for a total of just over $9 million. The project is one of the final components of the now completed PMLR construction work, By value, DBE contracts exceeded 25% on all contracts awarded on the completed project. Stacey and Whitbeck was the CMGC contractor for much of that work and exceeded their goals of DBE participation at more than 27%, which is impressive. TriMet will continue to work with Stacey and Whitbeck to maximize the DBE opportunities. The project is included in your 18-19 capital budget, and your approval is recommended.
Good. Questions for the general manager or staff? Hearing none, then, is there a motion to approve Resolution 18-09-69?
So moved.
Second.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 18-09-69 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Mr. General Manager and Board, that I see is all that's on our business agenda for this morning. Is there anything else that needs to come before us this morning?
Nothing at this time.
From the board perspective? All right, seeing none, I'm going to adjourn our meeting. Why don't we take a 5-minute break, maybe 7-minute, how about that?
Yeah.
And allow staff to get ready for the one briefing item we have. The time is late, so again, thank you, everybody, for hanging in there. Thank you.
One escaped.
He got
Come
away.
back in. Okay. Okay, what we'll do is just going to turn it over to Alan here, who'll be the maestro of the show on this. This is a follow-up, which we had intended to do at the last board retreat on September 12th, but we did not have enough time. Yet here we are again. This is a really important element, I think, in our managing of not only the next year's fiscal budget, but also we position the year in question that we're looking at for 2020 with our 5-year plan. So we really want to use this to get your important thoughts as staff is now embarking on starting to build the budget for the next fiscal year. Some things are fiscal in the year, and some things have impacts on the years ahead. Many of the things we talked about in HB 17, employer payroll tax, that are coming at us on the revenue and service side. The one thing I would share with you is we look at, it really hit me when Bernie put up one of the maps on HB 17 around the expansion. The state of this agency is really at an important time. As it grows, it has to also take care of the state of good repair. Often, many agencies forget to take care of the details and the investments needed to run what you do today because it takes a lot of attention and capital. While we're maintaining the existing system of infrastructure, we also need to rewire our internal practices and processes to be able to take on higher scale and complexity of the responsibilities that we actually have today and are coming our way. So we're trying to look around corners that aren't at us today as we overlay state of good repair responsibilities, plus as we become at some point this $2 billion a year operation. So with that, that's why I think it's very important. The strategic plan helps us and helps management to factor in the external issues as well as the internal issues on balance within the financial palette, as like our homes, of what we can afford. So often these things include trade-offs. Things like increasing safety and security on the system, which to me is very, very important. The cleanliness of our system, et cetera. So we all have many topics that we try and take with these responsibilities. So that is what Ellen's going to walk you through here this morning. So Ellen, maybe I'll turn it over to you. Part of it is underpinning, I should say, is the vision, mission, and values, which we will bring forward to you. And as you can hear from the report from Director Gonzalez, that we're already starting work on updating our vision, mission, and values. I think that will come to you in the November strategy session. So disconnected the two, but they'll come back together again probably in the November session. Alan, over to you.
Great, thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. What I want to do is set a little context and then open it up to discussion, because the idea here is that we are trying to elicit from you your thoughts and ideas and guidance about what we should focus in on, as Doug was mentioning, for the business plan that will cover from FY 2020 through FY 2024, and for the budget for FY 2020, which we are going into the development process for both of those now, even though they don't become effective until the middle of next calendar year. But now is the time to have a strategic discussion about what are the sort of the points of emphasis, the big strategic things that we should be paying attention to, whether there are opportunities or challenges, to think about the big framework right now, so that as we get into the greater details coming later in the year and into adoption for next year, we're really keeping those big picture items in mind. In your packet, the last piece were several different pieces of paper, and I just want to, as I said, give you a little context. There's a schedule that has just 3 different sets of colored bars across here to give you the sense of what we're looking at. Right now is the board briefing. As Doug mentioned, we'll be coming back to you for a discussion about the vision, mission, values. That may be in the November session. And then checking back in for the business plan in February, or before that, and then in February, and then bringing a final to you in April, aligned with the budget development, so that we are sort of lining those up, and each informs the other. And this sort of big strategic discussion informs both of them to begin with. You can see the development of the business plan, the blue bars in the middle, with a complete draft in February and a complete final in April. And then the budget development, which, though we're only a quarter in, it's a big enough undertaking that Dee and her staff have to start now, and we're having these public meetings to get input on the service plan and everything else that happens during FY 2020, with bringing the budget for public review to the board in March of 2019, and then the final asking for adoption in May of 2019. So that's just a sense of we're trying to elicit your guidance for now, but there's lots of work to be done, so there's time to refine and improve on that.
So can I just
please
interject one thing, and that is that right now, the first bar of the financial projections in preparation for budget is primarily service-based. So the budget preparation meetings, the workshops that are being held are highly focused on service, the cost of that service.
Thanks. So 3 other items in that little packet. One is just a couple of pages from the business plan for this year that reiterate the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges that we had identified for the FY19 through FY 2023 business plan. It's just a good reminder. I didn't want to talk through details of that. The other 2 items on here, I think what is probably the very last one, is the TriMet budget themes for the adopted budget in FY 2019. And this was the 6 items that were identified as themes or points of emphasis, again, for the budget development. And this is just a reminder of what was identified as for FY19 to be able to seed the conversation for now. It included safety, implementing the service enhancement plans, those long-term visions for improving service and expanding service, maintaining and preserving the system, that state of good repair that Doug mentioned earlier, improving the system reliability, including the on-time performance and customer expectations and experience, building ridership through quality service and innovation, and then advancing the regional corridor projects like the Southwest Corridor you just had a vote on earlier today. The final piece is a new piece. It's entitled Business Plan Potential Points of Emphasis. And this is something that staff spent a little bit of time thinking about what some of the bigger picture points of emphasis might need to be for this year, again, FY 2020 and beyond, to seed the conversation, not to hand you the answer and expect you to agree, but to seed the conversation. And I certainly don't want to talk through all of these, but I want to hit just a couple of highlights. They're organized in the 4 perspectives of the business plan: customers, internal business practices, people and innovation, and financial. So making sure that we look at these issues from multiple perspectives, so we're really taking into account all of the both opportunities and challenges. A few that I just wanted to touch on. Under customers, the very first bullet point, ways to positively impact mobility beyond direct provision of bus and rail service. We are a transit agency. One of the biggest things we presumably will always be doing is offering bus and rail transit. There have been improvements in the technology, in the transit industry, in the ability to provide information, to provide technology that supports that service and allows people to better connect to transit. And so there are other opportunities we could be looking at to make better connections with transit and broaden our benefit to a greater portion of the community, even beyond those who necessarily are able to ride right now. A few bullet points down: need for customer information and marketing services, both in terms of our ability to provide those and our expectations of our riders, and traffic congestion and the need to speed up service. As the economy has recovered and grown now, we certainly are all aware of the traffic, and our buses are operating through that, and our riders are feeling the pinch of longer trips and less reliable trips. And we're doing everything we can, but working with the city and other jurisdictions to try to speed those up. Under internal business practices, I think I'd just highlight the second one, the information technology modernization and adoption, and that's everything from the document control system, which you've already heard about from staff, that will make us more efficient, to the information technology and the ability to provide greater information to our customers and to do better maintenance and efficiency with our services. Under people and innovation, continuing to roll out and then really build on the success of Hop FastPass. And then under financial, as was discussed today, timing and implementation of HB 2017. It's a great resource. It's also a big hill to climb to be able to provide that service as quickly as possible and bring the benefits that are expected along with that. Starting, of course, with the low-income fare, which is already in place, and you've heard some positives on already, but lots of service expansion and work coming in our future. With that, kind of glancing over at Doug to see if there's anything he wants to add or if Dee wants to add anything, I would stop talking and look for some feedback and thoughts from you about what are sort of your highest priority points of emphasis for us to be thinking about in terms of developing the budget, developing budget priorities, developing the business plan, developing the business plan priorities, and making those updates to the key strategic actions and how we think about our actions around the measures and targets for FY 2020 through FY 2024.
All right. So it's our turn.
It's your turn. But I might just comment before. I think one of the issues as the general manager that I see in the organization is our capacity to execute. our total capacity, I made a list of things that this agency has on its plate right now. And often it gets forgotten. It just says, pile more on. So I think those are things that I want to be conscious of our organization's ability to retain great talent that has a balance in their life that's reasonable while we're making, significant transformation on many, many fronts. I'm going to list. We're looking at things like transit-oriented development. That's new. And that is very, very significant inside TriMet and for this region. Safety and security presence on the system. State of good repair. We have not implemented the Hop card fully yet. We're actually still at the early stages. The technology's been in place, but the actual rolling out takes a significant amount of complexity and regional engagement. HB 17 that we've spent a lot of time on, the fourth bus facility, the implementation to open up just a new facility, the transformation to get to a whole new energy platform. As those in the industry, my peers I met with recently in LA, it's very clear that this is one that makes all their eyes get really wide. Changing, not just ordering buses, but changing the fundamental infrastructure while you run the business every day. Diversity and inclusiveness. TriMet's need to evolve and shape and reach out and connect in different ways, maybe that it has to consider that it maybe didn't in some of the past. Southwest Corridor, Division Transit Project. And I could just go on. We're rebuilding all of our midlife rebuilds of our train cars. The agency has never done this before, let alone ordering new cars. HB 17 doesn't get to new cars. This is a very significant undertaking. So I leave that with you just for context of the balance of the agency's ability to digest and manage today, let alone position for tomorrow. So just for thoughts for your consideration. It's all embedded in our business plan that sits today. Please.
I appreciate the opportunity early in the process because, as you know, last year, some of us felt like we were asked too late to really provide the kind of support or direction to the staff about things that we felt were essential. And also, this is going to be our second version of the business plan. Is that correct?
Coming up will be the third.
The third
We have the
already?
second now. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
We're having too much
So,
fun.
I was a part of the development of the first, and I proposed last year that if it's not in the business plan, the business plan directs the budget. If it's not in the business plan, there needs to be some flexible money for things that come up throughout the year that you haven't anticipated. But the business plan should really reflect, what the critical needs are as seen by the management as well as the board. And so that was my proposal. We used to do budget themes. My proposal was to just make sure that what was in the business plan reflected generally what the board and management felt were essential for the organization. And whether we have budget themes or not as a board, that's neither here nor there. Some of the things that drives me is the report that you gave us last June on the status of the business plan and the things that are marked yellow, the things that haven't been started that are marked red, and whether they're still relevant, and also whether or not the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges that were listed in the last business plan are still relevant or are they new. And then specifically, as an individual board member, my emphasis has always been on making sure that the organization, the administrative organization, was staffed at a level that we could actually run this organization, because I felt so much had been put into the growth of service without a similar corresponding growth of staff to support that service. And then safety and security, the absence of me ever being able to see anybody whenever I'm out in the system to get support from. And I know that we're working on all of those things, but again, it sounds to me like the things that you've listed there would resonate with me, and also the technological infrastructure oh my gosh, when I think about just the ability to combine all of the data into very usable reports instead of having different formats all over the place on different kinds of data. And there are tools that can do that, but the agency doesn't own any of those tools right now. So things that would, dashboard kinds of tools that would enable us as a board and senior management to be able to quickly determine where we've got some weakness within the system and where we don't. So those were sort of my emphasis of wanting to make sure that the business plan took on a bigger, important role in terms of budget development, because it gets into the more specifics of the agency, and it provides staff with some direction about, you know, they need to advocate for why something fits within one of these various categories. But so that's really where I'm coming from. At this point, the things that I wanted to make sure were emphasized in the budget was technological upgrades, continuing the staffing at the operational level, and safety enforcement, including fare enforcement. Obviously, that's a whole topic in and of itself that we'll get to at another point, but I've only had my fare checked once, and that was on Wes, and I've been everywhere. So there's not enough people doing that to really help us close the loss of revenue issue that we've got as an agency. So that's where I'm coming from.
All right. How about others? Yes.
Since this is our time to give you our wish list. And Alan, you've come back a couple of times and we're finally hearing from you, so thank you so much for, I made some notes back.
Thank you.
The first time we were going to talk about it, and I've just held on to them. A theme for me is dealing with congestion and speed of travel. I think that's really important for our customers. I also think that a lot of actions we take should be looked at through the lens of, will it help increase ridership? That is very important to me. I agree with Linda that it's evident that we're too leanly staffed in certain functions, and so that should be looked at going forward. I'm very interested in your very first point about impacting mobility beyond direct provision of services, and that might be teaming with the private sector in some of the innovative transportation businesses that are out there. Of course, we can't take on risk the way a private entity can, so we have to be very cautious. But I think there are really exciting opportunities to leverage, I guess, what's going on in the private sector through partnering. I also agree that the information technology modernization is important to me. I've heard that that's an area where we need to continue to focus. And that covers everything that I had. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Please.
Thank you for this. I think this is the first time being a new board member that I am being a part of this process. So thank you for just making information digestible rather than just combing through, 30 or 40 pages of data. I think the emphasis that I just want to make and my input onto the business plan is really around workforce development. Some of those things were talked about at the previous meeting with Senator Margaret Carter and the other consultant that was there. I believe Dr. Stein was her name. To give, just sort of a thorough assessment in terms of where the agency was at in terms of professional development and the way that, certain parts of our workforce were being treated or promoted or kind of, building that kind of leadership pipeline within the organization. So I'm really interested in sort of the human investment that we are making as an agency. And I think my thoughts around the types of positions that would help TriMet in the 21st century as we are, becoming more diverse as a state, culturally, linguistically. More than ever, we are seeing also a very big income gap here in our state and nationally, right? It's and working class, middle class folks, low income folks are harder to live off of the wages that they're getting in this climate. And so I'm just very also sensitive to the barriers that those particular populations face and how much they have to rely on transit for basic needs. And I would like to see an internal workforce strategy developed in our agency to work with communities that are experiencing those challenges. And so I think my suggestion would be, can we have a big, bold vision to, have more community engagement positions within our agency that can, again, work directly on the ground with our transit riders who, may have, limitations and barriers. I think that will continue to have the public gain their trust in our agency, as well as increase ridership. So I think, again, having more, positions that are created that are community engagement focused, where we listen, develop relationships with community agencies and partners across the region would be really valuable. And I think to that point, I also want to stress that, again, young people, kids that are in high school right now that are dependent on transportation because, they can't afford to have a car, or they, have, large families where there's only one vehicle, whatever the reason. That is, I think, the population that we need to specifically target to increase our ridership in. And, I think the Youth Pass and some of the things that are coming forward by House Bill 2017 will help, but I really want us to have us think about how do we increase ridership among that kind of demographic, and how do we encourage them to be lifelong transit riders? So perhaps also looking into positions that we can create in our workforce around that, and maybe also expanding I know that there's a youth apprenticeship program between high schools that we do around different career exploration. And I know there was a comment made last meeting where someone said, well, I don't know if high schoolers want to work for TriMet, but I mean, I think high schoolers are interested in engineering and, mathematics fields and the whole sort of STEM field that, TriMet can offer through various positions are really enticing. So again, that's another sort of layer that I would add onto the workforce development piece.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for all the work that you've done to get us here. Of course, as far as the potential points of emphasis, I agree with them. I think they're a good representation of what, as an agency, we need to continue working on. I'm going to speak more to kind of what I see as the overarching kind of process that we're going through as we move forward. And Dr. Simmons and I we're just having a conversation with Dee in regards to kind of the budget theme and business plan interaction. And, I was part of the original budget theme conversation with Director Prosser when he was here and in charge of the Finance and Audit Committee. They're way more fun now that I'm in charge, just saying. But ultimately, I see kind of this concept, and it's going to come from my emphasis on being a finance person, by training and by vocation to some degree, about the importance of budget. What's the saying? If you show me your budget, I will tell you what your values are, basically. Where you put your money is really what you truly believe in. And I've done strategic planning and business planning for years, and it's amazing how sometimes agencies and organizations, not us, of course, will go through a bulk of work and then set the business plan or strategic plan on the shelf to be looked at next year to see if we accomplished anything. And I'm a huge believer in ensuring that we've got documents and concepts that really deliver to us as an agency some clear and distinct things that we're looking to achieve. And that's why I'm a big fan of the budget themes, because, ultimately, strategically, I think from a strategy perspective, strategies are more long-term. 3, 5, 10 years, because some of the things that you look at in strategy, you can't change very quickly. There's the concept that in the short term, you got variable and fixed costs. In the long term, everything is variable because anything can be changed. But ultimately, as we look strategically, I think these budget themes should stay consistent, similar to the strategic financial plan. I see the business plan as really tactical. How do we take kind of these overarching concepts and themes that we've agreed as an agency, and we can change them, we can adjust them, we can move them around based on what's needed as far as priorities go. But ultimately, I think, this process of identifying budget themes separate from the business plan, I think is a very valuable exercise and allows us to very, quickly and succinctly look at the things that we're accomplishing. And historically, we've gone through and attached kind of our budget initiatives to a budget theme to ensure that we're actually achieving the items that we're looking at accomplishing. And I would suggest that we continue to do that as we look at the business plan, in my opinion, being more tactical in the things that we're doing in the current year. These are the things we want to achieve, we want to accomplish. I think they all need to fit and work together. But from where I sit, I see the budget themes really, being kind of that overarching perspective where the board, I would hope that the board would take the opportunity annually to kind of prioritize the budget themes, which then drives down, to staff and team members, which then creates our business plan of how we're tactically going to move forward. So there was a little bit of a question about process that we've had historically in the Finance and Audit Committee, and then through other conversations that I just kind of wanted to put my opportunity to inject at this point as we continue to have this conversation regarding the business plan itself, and then also that overarching process that we're using.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, I guess where I was struggling was from a staff position. If you're trying to crosswalk the themes to the business plan, to the budget, and I thought that the things that were the themes were the satisfied riders, satisfied community stakeholders, satisfied broader community. Those are the things that I felt the board would weigh in on in order to say what are the priority areas within the business plan that would be subject to maybe refinement or elimination, addition, or whatever, so that there wouldn't need to be some kind of a crosswalk always saying, was the direction from themes. It just seemed to me that these are the themes, and that within the themes was the strategy that you talked about. But the themes were in terms of, I don't know what you call those things on the right-hand side.
Those are goals under the business
the goals
organization.
are kind of like the themes. And so that's the way I was thinking about it. And so it seemed to me to be sort of redundant, because then when we get reports that say, if these are the goals, themes, I call them themes, if these are the themes, then how are we doing on them? And what are we doing to try to ensure that we realize these? And in looking at the report from last year, that we got in June, we see that some of them we've made good progress on and some of them we haven't. And should we add anything in here? I guess it's a matter of, half a dozen of one and six in another. I was trying to simplify the process to basically embed the themes into the budget, the business plan.
Yeah, I think I think it does. You could probably interject. Part of it is, I think, in the business plan that we spent time developing was also trying to represent the key priorities of the broader responsibilities of the overall agency.
Right.
There's many, many spokes on this wheel,
right.
Whether it be environmental, whether it be culture and inclusiveness, whether it be safety security, whether it be IT. Right. We go down a long list of, I call spokes on the wheel. Right. And how do we manage those responsibilities strategically, to minimize our blind spots, because any blind spot can knock you out if you don't focus on it. And there's a lot of examples globally of Take Union Carbide, great company that doesn't exist anymore because it didn't take care of something in Bhopal, India very well
Right.
many years ago. And you go down to Enron, you go down to World, so blind spots. So part of this is they're really looking at a bit of the balanced scorecard of strategy to making sure the board of directors and management is picking the right strategies that support the broader goals or themes. So that's how I've always tried to put strategy and tactics together on an annual basis, let alone making sure we're looking beyond, are the annual points of emphasis fitting with the longer-term positioning of where
Of
we're
the
trying to position the
organization,
company,
right.
knowing what's coming at us.
Right.
And lots we don't know that's coming at us. And each year to take that photograph together of alignment in a conversation around, gee, do we really have this right? Or they're new. In fact, if we go back to last year, right after we published it, HB 17 came out sort of 45 days later.
Right.
Pretty strategic and structural. And so we always have to be updating and modernizing our efforts. And so I use that as an example of the continuum that it should never end, as opposed to that's the strategy. See you in 5 years, management report back once a year. So I think because the speed of technology and the speed of our issues, I would suggest is accelerating up.
Yeah.
And we want to be careful that we've got, or prudent that we've got the yearly tactics and emphasis that drive strategy. And sometimes strategy has to change too. I used to work for a Fortune 500 company many years ago, and boy, I tell you, we have 30-year plans. We have a lot of capital that goes out 30, 40 years, lots of stuff behind the scenes. But as we zoom closer, we're trying to put the lens on that 3, 5, 7-year period in addition to what are we doing for ourselves today for next year's budget. So it's trying to create those connections that they're not unrelated, they are related. And I think the great example I would suggest of IT is that really is a significant challenge for this agency because we're trying to run this agency at times on some things that are really modern. We should all be really proud of, like virtual smart cards. But like most agencies, they probably got things running on their just something short of DOS somewhere in the inventory. Most companies have it. So it's how do you modernize the IT strategy to get to support it. It should be a liberating tool, not an inhibitor. Part of IT for us is, despite our team's great efforts, and there's some heroic stuff in there, we have to modernize IT. So I think that, to me, is a very strategic issue for this agency, for our customers, for ourselves.
And I was new last year for budget development for the first time. And when I looked at the themes, in my opinion, they hadn't changed. And yet there were things that really needed to be, if we were going to use themes, we really needed to rewrite where we were. And I think the rewrite really is a good rewrite. But it means that we have to, if we're going to stay with themes, and this is really up for the board to decide, and two people aren't here, is that we really need to start that process early enough so that it can be factored into the development of business plan and the budget instructions. Because we need to come up with a way as a board that we can provide that feedback in an organized way. And it's really, do we want to continue to have themes? If we do, we really need to consider what we wrote last year, if it's still relevant this year, or if there are ways that we need to modernize that. And we need to do it in a timely enough manner that it impacts the instructions to the staff and development of the budget.
So if I could just jump in for a second, sorry for interrupting.
No, that's okay.
But Director Stovall made a very good analogy when he compared the budget themes to our strategic financial plan guidelines. We set those in place in July 1st of 2014, and we revisit them every year to see how we're doing in relationship to the plans, to the guidelines. We recognize that there are some that now need tweaking, and we will be bringing recommendations for that forward. It is possible that you could consider taking the year off and just calling them the TriMet budget themes and then revisit them. We can tell you every year how we're doing in relationship to the business plan and the themes. And then if they need to be changed, we can change them. But they would remain the overarching, as Director Stovall had recommended, the overarching guidelines for the development of the budget plan.
So part of my concern, though, is just the concept that, you know, historically, I used to do strategic planning for hospitals, and we took a 3 to 5 to 10 year perspective. And then we went to, okay, we're only going to do it 3 to 5 years. Then we went to only going to do it 3 years because everything is changing so quickly. Now we do it every year. Well, the problem with that is that your strategy chart looks like this, because ultimately we're adjusting so many things annually that there really isn't a long-term plan of what we're trying to achieve. And you know, that's a little bit of my concern about if we're changing things too often, then how are we truly working towards an outcome that we want to get to in 10 years, which is ultimately going to be the challenge, because some of the things we plan for in capital alone are, you know, 20, 30-year capital expenditures and investments. And so, I mean, I would encourage us to look at kind of those overarching themes similar to the strategic financial plan that, you know, kind of, you know, things that can stand the test of time, that really give us the opportunity to go back to them and say, okay, these are the overarching things that we're trying to accomplish as an agency, and then how do the things that we're doing fit into these things. I see the business plan being more of an annual tactical action plan to say, okay, this is how we're going to effectively execute on some of these things, or not on some of them, but all the things that we want to accomplish based on this kind of longer term goal, which the action plan or business plan can be adjusted annually to address whatever we need to address. And the overall budget themes can also be adjusted in their priority, you know, based on what we need to do in that time frame to accomplish the longer term goal. But, you know, I think part of, and this was called out, I believe in the bond issuing, not the bond issuing, but our rating, I think in the rating it actually said, one of the things that impressed them was our strategic financial plan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but because it takes a longer term approach about what we're trying to accomplish, and allows, you know, future anybody that sits in any of these seats to kind of be able to reference something that's been identified as important and consistent. And so that's the thing where, you know, I think the business plan is something that truly is a shorter term focus, and that if we put some of the things that we want as overarching direction over time into a document that really is going to be changing quite often, I think we run the risk of doing the, you know, change of focus annually, which kind of hurts our long-term trajectory, which I think is one of the hallmarks of President Warner's leadership. So I brought him into the conversation. He wasn't even. He probably.
I'm here. I'm with
probably coming in kicking and screaming. He's like, did Travis just obligate me to something by saying that? But there you have it.
So let me say. So this is good, and what I've heard, I can't I agree with everything that's been said here in terms of the priorities, and I think these budget themes, most of them will fit underneath most of these budget themes in terms of the things that I heard were priorities.
And they
so
fit under
I
these
think,
goals.
yeah, I think it's a matter of degrees and priorities and how much you want to put into various areas. And I think it is a tactical, our budget is more tactical than it is strategic. But I agree with you, we need to have a strategic thought about where we want to go. And sort of saying I talk about this is that, you know, the system of the future, what does it look like? I don't know. I've got, you know, do we need a subway? Do we need a bury the system to really make it work through Portland? And obviously the changing demographics, the changing income levels, the populations and the travel patterns. We know that the traditional hub and spoke is not the answer. So I want to kind of frame out and I'd love to have some ideas before I leave the board about where do we want to go in the future as best as we can ascertain, and then to make sure tactically we're making incremental changes to get us to that point. Doesn't mean we won't get smarter, you know, 5 years from now and say that doesn't make sense and the vision was dumb, but I believe if we do some futurizing, will help us figure out where we want to be with technology, with the demographics, with the service change. I don't have the answers for you, but boy, I would love to just have some thoughts and dialogue someplace as a TriMet board about where we think this system looks like to increase ridership, to get us to all the other goals we want to be. So I think,
Kind of a gap analysis.
Yeah, well-
Of what it would take incrementally to
Yeah.
get there. And I mean, we've got that in certain
We do.
specific areas.
I might just add to this, I think this actually gets to, as a new general manager in here, I actually think this, what we'll be bringing to you in November, as I've indicated, I think we need a discussion on the vision, mission, and values around the vision, the mission. It really gets to beyond the 5 years, and not just I'll call the SWOT analysis of the budget photograph that's coming, but we probably need to do, management needs to do some work on the gap as which we get vision. I personally believe our industry is changing, that you'll probably highlights of things to come, that we need to move beyond the mindset of a transit authority to a mobility agency. Personally, I believe, my own belief here is this agency needs to become 100% accessible. We talk about equity, but we seem to forget sometimes those who need access to our system. We have bus stops that are not fixed, and I think it's compelling to compete for federal dollars in the future. We're going to have to differentiate ourselves in a changing federal landscape like possibly never before, as that more people compete for that pool that puts financial oxygen into our region. So I do believe if we could start that conversation with vision, mission, and values, the other elements of the gap in that conversation, which we'll bring to you in November, I think we have to start populating that gap. Technology, part of the November session is intended also to be, we're going to, as educational to help inform vision, mission, and values in that future. I also want to review with you where we're looking at as a mobility strategy. Not just the vision of mobility, should the board opine and agree with that vision. We're also getting outside inputs and employee inputs. But to populate mobility, I think, is going to be a really key instrument. Other technologies coming at us longer term, driverless vehicles. Driverless vehicles, not only for somebody else to drive, driverless vehicles in our agency. It's coming. And there used to be cabooses in every train car in North America. That doesn't exist anymore because technology changed it. And so we need to think about the vision of mobility, and the automation side, I think, is extremely powerful coming at us. But part of it is also what does that future workforce look like? We're struggling to get bus operators, not just TriMet, the industry is. I was just at the conference this week. Everyone's got the same problem. Well, there's technologies and others that may help us. How do you redeploy, and you get, instead of having operators driving a train, can we use them more in the customer service side? Because we really need their help and their talent. So I think there's shifting work dynamics and demands too. So I think hopefully with the vision, mission, and value conversation, management then can go back and start maybe that gap discussion. Which may get to Travis's point around themes.
so what else do you need from us?
Yeah.
We overwhelmed you probably right now, right?
This has been a great discussion.
So are we having themes then?
Well, I don't see how we can escape themes for the budget, I think.
Then I guess we need to have a review to see if the language that was in the 19 and whether to take the thing off still are appropriate, and somehow together either redraft or edit or do something to provide staff with the new updated version.
I think I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. So the themes for fiscal year 2019, I'm new, just trying to understand this. Was this built off of the ones that the previous fiscal years?
Well, that started as a template, but they've been completely rewritten in many cases.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're here as the board today to.
We were here to discuss whether to continue with themes or how to give direction to management about what we saw as priorities for the budget development.
Okay.
So anything that's missing, you say, geez, we have a blind spot, we didn't capture something. Things like, for example, we'll be bringing to include, hopefully by the end of this calendar year, is introducing a risk registry, a corporate risk registry approach to managing risk in the business.
Right.
So that's something that I've got our teams working on right now. Because as the agency grows, how you run a $600 million business and how you run a $1.4 to $2 billion business, the same people can't just do all the same things. So we need more systems and mechanisms and processes to protect us from, because we're now carrying more volume and complexity. So it's an example of a strategy that you'll see in the next budgets.
Well, and I'm interested, this is a business plan, because see, I think if it's not in the business plan, it shouldn't be in the budget. But, my feeling is some of these things were here, like lighting at stations and development around stations to make them more safer or secure. How is that fitting into your directions to staff in terms of whether budget dollars are going to, because it's a yellow right now or a red, within the business plan. So those are the kinds of things that, is it going to fall off the business plan? Or is it going to move forward? Is it actually going to get more emphasis this year? Because that fits within safety and security.
Yeah, so in the case of lighting, for example, it's what one might say, let's just go put a light outside. This is where I think TOD has got a tremendous opportunity.
Oh, it does.
We have under SEPTED, crime prevention through environmental design standards, the empty parking lot or the empty station is you need vibrancy, low cut shrubs, lighting. And so to me, lighting is part of the modernizing and liberating of our real estate that we actually own. We have a lot of money that's locked up in land that we don't use. So with it can help address not only that, but many, many things.
Right.
Including drive new ridership, because hopefully they're actually on our property. You can take an escalator downstairs, get on the train or bus, off you go. Those things typically take a lot of years. We've also got, that would come with the lighting topic, I'll call Renew the Blue line. So there's some of our existing state of good repair. There's upgrades to elevators you saw, and that is lighting in elevators, in addition to lighting at the stations themselves. So there's a sort of a palette approach to what do we do with our existing infrastructure. So we need to continue. This takes years and years to make that evolution and a change. So when we do upgrades, they get included in those one by one. And when we do new lines, like the Orange Line, Division Transit, as an example, would be the number 4 line on Powell. Some of those, what were just bus stops tied to the municipal street system, will now become some lighting that comes with kind of a platform for a articulated bus. So we're getting at it in many ways over many years. You're quite right, has
to sort of bring this to closure, one of the things I'm thinking of is that in the past, the board has approved the budget themes.
Correct.
So could we set a point in time when we could give somebody modifications to language that could be shared among all of us, that we could get a coordinated theme that we want to approve on? Or do we feel we don't need to approve it every year?
I guess I think the board probably does need to nod its head that these are the right budget themes. And if we're missing a theme because of some of the priorities we want to accomplish, we should probably be modifying or adding to this list.
Okay.
Or if we can declare victory on some area, remove it from the list. I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
I think my question, is just there's mission, vision, and values, and then there's themes. So I think I'm still trying to understand what is the relationship.
I think we all are. I
Okay.
think that's.
Okay.
I don't think.
Just trying to understand.
I don't think that you're alone.
Okay.
But my estimation is that we will, as a board, say, this is the right general priorities areas for the budget, right?
Okay.
And within each one of those areas, lighting's a good example. Where does lighting fit in there? Where does fair enforcement?
It's under safety and security.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's right. And if that's a priority for you and a priority of the board, we want to make sure that the budget reflects that.
Right.
Under that theme.
And I know Craig felt that this was kind of like baseball and apple pie. It didn't really give any specifics, just general, our overarching things.
Yeah, we can definitely be more specific if the board wants to in that.
I guess I don't. I guess I disagree. I absolutely don't think we should be giving specifics at this level. I mean, the fact that for me to get down into whether or not we're going to have a budget decision regarding lighting or something else, I mean, that's just not my, that's not my input on the conversation for the budget. I mean, my input on the conversation is really the overarching perspective of the highest level that we can give. Yeah, we want to convey to the team, what's important. So safety and security is very important. And then, frankly, I'm not going to be close enough to really opine on whether or not safety is the most important thing. I mean, lighting is the most important thing we should be doing, or bus shelters.
Yeah, we're kind of staff to tell us what.
Exactly, and that's the piece.
We don't agree with it, well, let them know.
Yeah, and that's the piece where I'm saying the budget themes to me are really my opportunity to give an overarching direction to our team to say, as we develop the budget for 2019, these are the things that you want to be. We need to have as prioritization. So, in your decision making, as you're going through developing the budget, if you've got to decide between this and this, you look at the board's priorities to decide if that's going to be a part of the conversation. If there's a need to prioritize something in their process, then here's some direction from the board. At the end of the day, I mean, I'm still trusting our team to do do the work that they're brought on to do.
I guess I'm getting down to trying to get some resolution as to what's the time frame for us looking at the themes that we've got and deciding if they're correct or not.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that.
I was just going to say on that, I leaned over and asked Dee the same question. Could you when we need that kind of content for the budget?
I think that if we're going to be talking about the mission, vision, values in November, that would be a good time to tie this in, because it's in the December. Not a lot happens in December. We actually load the budget guidelines in the first week in January for staff. But everyone needs to be thinking about that, and everyone who's listening is already to figure out, okay, what are the priorities? We've been using this as our guidelines for a while.
Now, last year, Dee, the instructions to staff for budget, because it was in the November timeframe that Craig got really upset.
Yeah.
We had an accelerated
because the instructions to
process
staff for budget development had already been sent out in October. And we had not yet, as a board, come together on the themes.
I'll go back and check the dates, but it's
So that's what made us think that we needed to have a strategy conversation in late summer, early fall on it, so that instructions for budget development wouldn't have gone out to staff.
Well, we're working on fiscal year 2020's business plan.
That's what I'm saying. You may have a different calendar this year.
That's why we rolled it way out. What's that?
You may have a different calendar this year than last year.
Yes.
Okay.
Based on what happened last year, I think, yes, we do have it.
Okay.
But if you did do it, I think November is the right time to do that. What we can do is a little bit of advance work for you, and we will put our heads together and send out some homework for you.
Okay, good.
In advance of the November meeting so that all the board members will be prepared.
Yeah, well, I'd say look at the themes, and if these themes aren't, if the right themes or something's missing, especially for the new board members, let's talk about it. That's the perfect, that November time is the perfect timing to do it.
And I do want to just note the budget themes, they actually specifically, explicitly call on the mission in the introductory paragraph. So both the business plan and the budget themes are tied to the vision, mission, value. And we developed, as the themes were, I think, informed by previous year's themes, but we developed a crosswalk between the business plan and the themes. So we'll work a little bit on how we make those ties more explicit to help set you up for that conversation in November.
Okay with that? Okay. Everybody okay with that?
Good.
All right. I think we should declare victory.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We pounded this baby.
Is it still today?
Well, happy Halloween, everybody.
Come back up again.
Hey, we haven't gotten into Groundhog Day.
I thought it was Thursday.
Thank you. It was a long meeting, but I think a lot of good stuff.
Thank you very much.
Discussion today. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I had a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Oh,
Can't even
well,
think of a
my
board
goodness.
meeting. You know, we've had that many components to it.
I think I'm still confused, but that's okay. In conclusion, I think I'm still
Yep.
like
And then, you know,
budget.